This story began with a mysterious fair-haired man in a black hood asking a little girl what she would give him in return if he sacrificed everything. The girl replied that if he did it, she would risk everything, everything for his sake. The stranger asked not to forget this promise, and blue butterflies began to fly around. This girl with snow-white hair and a determined gaze of blue eyes is the last heiress of the White family, Rose. Her domain is the smallest and only sovereign territory in this world, a small town in the snowy mountains. Rosa headed to the conservatory, where she began to call loudly for IG, her court magician. IG replied that he needed a moment to fix the magic thermostat. While waiting for IG, Rosa reached for the red apples lying nearby and happily bit into one of them, smiling joyfully at the deliciousness. 500 years ago, the White Kingdom was brutally conquered by the Empire, which refused to make any concessions or give up any part of its power. King White, and about 50 people who followed him, despite everything, were driven into the icy wastes of the White Mountains, so the flourishing kingdom instantly turned into a small settlement. After the king died and Rose became the head of the White House, she struggled to earn money to compensate for the lack of sunlight, fertile soil, and other basic things. Rose always understood that if it weren't for IG and his magic, they would all have frozen to death long ago in this endless cold. IG was the only wizard who followed King White 500 years ago, the great wizard raised by dragons, the archmage Yggdrasil. IG was always the little lady's protector, he taught her, and was always there for her all the time as she grew up and became a real lady. Rosa and IG argued about the magician's excessive salary, and other people who saw them happily noted that the lady and Yggdrasil were getting along surprisingly well today. Rosa's mantelpiece poured her tea and informed her that he had sent out all the invitations as requested. It turned out that there were rumors among the nobility about a tour of the White Territory. Rosa said with satisfaction that the aristocrats of the Empire are very fond of everything exclusive, and she will extort a lot of money from them for invitations to their lands. IG noted with amusement that putting a weight limit on things so that people would buy everything here at White's was an incredible business move, and Rosa's business acumen even scared him. Rosa asked IG if there were any good ways to make money, and he replied that he had heard a lot lately about people looking for treasure in the mountains. This answer did not satisfy Rosa because rumors about mana stones were just rumors. However, IG noted that he was looking beyond the White Mountains because there was indeed a wave of mana growing there. In the middle of a violent snowstorm, somewhere high in the mountains, a group of men screamed at each other in fear to run, because an angry monster with blue eyes had appeared. The maid angrily asked Rosa if she was really going to go to the mountains alone. Outside the lands of White is very dangerous. Rosa calmly told Margaret not to worry, as she would be accompanied by Arthur, the Knight Protector of the White Estates, who had promised to watch over her. When asked how exactly IG will determine the location of the stones, the magician replied that such minerals emit very strong energy when there are many of them in one place, so they will definitely not miss them. Already in the cave, confused expressions appeared on the faces of all three. Rose grumbled to IG that it was nothing like the gems he had promised. In the cave, radiating incredible magical power, sat a small white dragon who turned to look at the unexpected guests. Among the stories of traveling minstrels, there have always been stories about dragons. Incredibly strong, destructive dragons and heroes who fought with them. One such noble became a dragon slayer by killing a baby dragon and returning to the kingdom. However, the angry dragon burned the hero together with the entire kingdom. While IG was thinking, the little dragon was already in Rosa's arms. IG fearfully asked the lady to leave because if she overcame the scent of the baby dragon, the dragons would come at any distance for her head. Rosa melancholically replied that the little dragon had attached itself to her and wouldn't let go. She couldn't do anything. Moreover, if the baby dragon cries, its mother may actually appear. Rose ordered IG and Arthur to do something, but they are bound by their oaths and cannot harm the baby dragon. At these words, Rosa began to growl that they were both just weaklings. IG sat down to examine the baby dragon. By human age, he was about 3 years old, but it didn't look like he had been well taken care of, because the cub was very thin and still didn't speak. Rosa felt very sorry for the little dragon, and she immediately reached into her bag, pulling out a sandwich and offering it to the little dragon. However, he refused, because white dragons only eat frozen food. Meanwhile, IG insisted that Rosa should return with Arthur, and IG himself would stay to meet with the parents of this little dragon. Rosa did not understand why he wanted to be left alone. IG gently replied that white dragons are usually very hostile, so they could be in danger, and a great wizard should never put his lady in danger. Rosa got angry at these words and grabbed Iga's belt with all her might. She stated that as his lady, she would not allow IG to go into such danger alone. A snow-white figure emerged from the darkness and addressed the sorcerer. IG once again emphasized that Rose should stay behind him, and Arthur determinedly began to draw his sword for the battle with the dragon. The dragoness snarled angrily that they had dared to disturb her sleep and lay a hand on her child, and now they would regret entering dragon territory. But suddenly the dragoness stopped mid-sentence and ran past the trio. She bent over her child with tears in her eyes and whispered joyfully that the little dragon was finally sleeping like an angel. The dragoness told that her little dragon couldn't sleep and only cried. He didn't rest at all for almost 3 years, crying at the top of his lungs, and finally he fell asleep sweetly. The dragoness once again sincerely thanked everyone for taking care of her child and said that she had inherited these mountains from her mother, because of which IG recognized who this dragoness was, the daughter of old Anastasia. The dragoness was fired with the idea of seeing white, and was simply delighted to see such beauty in the midst of the harsh mountains. The dragoness said that she had heard from her mother that there was a small settlement in the mountains, but she had no idea that it was so beautiful here. Rosa's pride was hurt by the words about the small settlement. The dragoness lamented that she did not know how to raise a child, and Rosa immediately said that her mage would be happy to help with that. IG was simply shocked by these words. The dragoness happily promised to give Rosa territories and some diamond mines in return, which couldn't help but please Lady White. Meanwhile, IG cautiously asked if Rose knew that baby dragons matured for 400 years. However, Rose didn't care, because she wasn't going to make IG the permanent guardian of the baby dragon. In kindergarten, Snow talked to another dragoness, Gold, about the fact that in this town, people surprisingly calmly accept another race and do not chase them away. Snow thinks it's all because of the incredible Rose. Snow took her son Eno in her arms and told her extremely surprised friend that she decided to stay and live in the White Settlement. Late in the evening, IG was sitting in his office and working when Rosa knocked on his door. IG immediately said that this was overtime and that he would require additional payment for the visit. Rosa unsuccessfully tried to bargain with Igor, but was forced to agree to his terms. After that, the magician's mood instantly changed, and he joyfully opened the door, greeting Rosa. Rosie needed to meet some dwarf. IG started laughing, because of which Rosa blushed and shouted that she was not interested in romance but in business. IG noted that dwarves are a very picky race and can refuse to cooperate at any time, and will also demand a lot of money. However, this did not bother Rose. She was determined to develop White with the help of dwarven technology. IG agreed to help her find a master. When Rosa came out, IG remembered what a crybaby she had been as a child, and how offended she was when IG didn't want to play with her or teach her anything. IG looked out the window and thought with horror that time was flying too fast. He didn't even realize when Rosa had time to grow into a beautiful lady. In the high tower, someone was impatiently reprimanding the mage at work because he couldn't wait to seize power over the church and control over the empire. Someone threatened the magician that his patience was at its limit. The magician promised to do everything on time, and after the end of the conversation, he realized that they desperately needed a spy in the Kingdom of White. In the hot forge, the dwarven smiths were working on their works of art, when suddenly a male bird brought an invitation from Yggdrasil to their head. Meanwhile, both dragons told Rosa that they wanted to stay in White, so she should make room for them in the future construction. Gold even promised to cover all expenses. IG noted that such an offer could not be refused, and suggested that they stop sending invitations to the aristocrats, because for now they have enough money, and it is not worth attracting attention. The magic of transference suddenly began to shine in the air, and all the previously invited dwarves fell screaming in front of the surprised Rosa and Yggdrasil. While the dwarf was scolding Yggdrasil for the dangerous teleport, he was suddenly attacked by Rosa's stone assistant and led in an unknown direction to fix it. When everyone, pure and radiant, gathered at the negotiation table, Rosa introduced herself as the ruler of the White Province. The dwarf replied unhappily that Rose was too young to be a ruler. At these words, IG got angry in an instant and wanted to do something, but Rosa expertly changed the topic of conversation and suggested that the dwarves take a walk and rest today. As they walked through White together, the dwarf remarked sullenly that this area was very small, and however, structures made of snow and ice would help quite a bit. Rosa carefully caught every word. Suddenly, the dwarf saw a local blacksmith and immediately jumped up to him, telling him how to hold a hammer correctly. Rosa's plan to interest the dwarf worked. In the evening at the tavern, the dwarf insisted on the local drink, which he liked in a strange way. He saw a small faceless golem and decided to fix it on a drunken head. In the morning, Rosa demanded a cosmic sum as compensation for the spoiled golem baby dragon. However, the dwarf could always choose to teach White's men swordsmanship and blacksmithing. Rosa pointed out that if the dwarf didn't want to work with her because she was too young, then he could look at the offer as a long-term investment in the future, and the dwarf agreed. Gold thought that a place where dwarves and dragons would live together would be incredible. She realized that Yggdrasil's true purpose was to make Rose the perfect ruler of Utopia. Late in the evening, IG called Rosa to his office because he had found a new mage and wanted to discuss him. Rosa got angry because IG didn't even ask her for permission. While Rosa screamed at IG and he tried to explain that he had too much work to do, the boy sitting on the sofa claimed that he could see the future of this world. IG saw that Rosa was interested in these words and began to actively persuade her to agree. The lady refused, but IG offered to take James as his apprentice, free of charge. Rose was walking down the corridor towards Gold and thinking about James's words that the whole world would be engulfed in flames. However, she decided that now she had more pressing matters. Meanwhile, Gold, who had been asked by Rosa to find ways to market White's goods elsewhere, told her good news. The goods were in demand outside the Empire. However, Gold also told disturbing things. There were some disturbances in the Empire. There were even victims among the population. Rosa looked at the list of victims and froze in horror. Rosa personally escorted all these people who wanted to earn money and returned to White. The main wave emigrated to Florence, a city nearby. Gold said that those who could not pay their taxes became slaves. To the remark that White's people are educated and would have no problems with work, she said that taxes are unrealistic for foreigners. Rosa was furious. She knew every single one of these people and decided in an instant that she had to teach the impudent nobles of the Empire a lesson they would remember for the rest of their lives. Meanwhile, James was secretly talking to someone through his wand. He said that he had successfully won the trust of the ruler of White and would carry out his spy mission. James came out of his hiding place and ran into Rosa and Ego, arguing that she must go to Florence and save her people. Rosa didn't want to regret anything anymore. Late at night, ravenous wolves chased the frightened boy, who was barely breathing from exhaustion and terror. Tom thought he'd rather be penniless, but White began to cry. The next moment, Tom heard a voice behind him that he never expected to hear again. It was Rosa, IG, and James who came to save him. Tom gave a shout of joy at the sight of Lady Rose, but she only hissed at him, for the dogs were still near. Rose threw them big, tasty bones to calm the animals down. Rosa told Tom to return to White, while she herself planned to search for everyone else, those who had also fallen into unjust captivity in the Empire. At a nearby estate, a baron and his guards abused a slave woman, blackmailing her with money and her own child. At that moment, when the baron threw the baby to the floor with all his might, and the woman screamed terribly, Yggdrasil appeared and gracefully caught the child in front of everyone. Rosa menacingly said that the owner's dogs are very cute, but her personal dogs are much stronger. Meanwhile, the woman ran up to IGA in confusion, taking her child in her arms. Rosa noticed that her dogs don't bite people, and the next moment she turned them on the baron and the guards because they are trash, not people. James was quite frightened by Rosa's ruthless behavior. The baron tried to attack Rosa, but IG knocked him back with a magical blast. The baron began to shout that the magic tower owed him a lot of money and that they would deal with him. When IG asked why the tower was to blame for a man without magic, the baron started talking about ingredients, and James almost felt sick. Chimeras were currently being studied in the tower, and humans were needed to create them. The baron tried to point out that these people were his property in any case, and therefore he could do whatever he wanted with them, including giving them for organs and experiments. Rosa thought that the ancient traditions, when the weak suffer and the strong get away with everything, is the world that Dandelion, the creator of this world, wanted so much. Yggdrasil suddenly heard Rosa's icy voice behind him, and then felt an incredible energy and quickly turned around, shocked by what he heard. Rose, who had never had magic before, now conjured up an insane amount of energy, and with her eyes turning a piercing blue, she declared that she wasn't going to just stare anymore. There was a legend that blue butterflies and a divine beast only appeared in front of those whom Dandelion loved, and now it was Rose, shocking everyone present. A giant pillar of light pierced the space and illuminated Rose. A woman with a baby in her arms reverently whispered, "Holy Virgin, Mistress of Light." While Rosa was bragging to Ego about this pillar of light, he examined the unconscious Baron and remarked that it would be difficult to remain unnoticed after such a thing. They had to leave. Rosa asked the woman if she knew where all the other prisoners were kept, and the woman asked the Holy Virgin to follow her. Rosa was confused and did not fully understand why she was called that. The underground prison extended many floors down. The magicians turned on the light, and a terrible stench hit his nostrils. Rosa mentally begged for someone to be alive here. Someone's hand suddenly touched Rosa, and the girl screamed in fright. Behind the bars was Raymond, the priest who had left White, and now he looked simply terrible. IG asked Raymond to remember what happened to him, any details. Raymond tiredly replied that he wasn't even sure if he was alive now or dead after all the experiments. IG decided that Raymond was currently a chimera, a hair's breadth from death, undead. Rosa protested desperately that a cleric with holy power couldn't be undead. Rose still felt the pulse of life in Raymond, and he told her that mages had drawn humans and elves here and started injecting them with incomprehensible drugs from which most quickly died. Raymond insisted on saving the elves because they were trying to help the religious order destroy the chimera, despite the fact that it was not an elven battle. Rosa gently told Raymond that he was a resident of White before going to the temple, so he could just go back and live as before. Raymond was indescribably grateful to the lady. Rosa noted that Yggdrasil is stronger than all the wizards in the tower, so they must visit the magic tower and show what an attack on White's people is all about. The Baron came to his senses buried in the ground up to his neck. Rosa told him that she would take his fortune and title as compensation for her people and her personal reward for the journey. When the Baron heard about White, he was momentarily stunned. He realized that this white-haired girl was the real Lady Rose White. Rose said that Dandelion was definitely not looking at the Baron anymore, so he would die thinking about his sins. The Trinity disappeared into the portal, and the Baron screamed in a terrible voice of despair. The Trinity returned to White, and Margaret tearfully rushed to hug Rosa. Meanwhile, Arthur noted that if he had known the dangers of this mission, he would have joined. Rosa only had time to assure everyone that everything was fine with her because IG was always there and fainted, having spent too much divine power at one time. While Rosa rested, IG went to Gold and told him everything that had happened. Precisely because Rosa rushes to help without thinking, IG wanted to ask Gold something. However, Gold pointed out that despite Yggdrasil's desire to protect Rose and create a safe world around her, the lady must choose her own path, and not I to control her. Gold convinced Yggdrasil that since Rose's powers had already awakened, he could not hide her back in the little perfect world. They both wonder how strong Rose will become. IG remembered how many kings and queens had died during his eternal life. When Rosa's parents died, he had to stay with her, take care of her, and raise her strong. When little Rosa was sad and asked if IG knew her mother, the magician put a tiara on the girl's head and showed in the mirror that she herself had the features of all her loved ones. Rosa did not have to be sad. When IG asked little Rose what she wanted more than anything else, the little girl said riches. Then all the people in White will be happy, and that will make her happy too. In the present, Rosa is very upset because she could not save everyone in time. IG noted that it was not her fault and promised that he would not interfere with the lady's path in the future. IG assures that as long as he, the great magician, is around, no one will be able to hurt or steal Rosa. These words for some reason make the girl blush. She is very pleased to be next to Igor. A young dark-haired man in a green cloak with a hood carefully hid from his pursuers. He knew he couldn't get home with his tail, so he had to hide somewhere. During the construction of the dwarf, Knocker noticed that there were many elves in the settlement. They helped with the construction, not shying away from work because they felt indebted to Rosa. The master blacksmith showed Knocker the sword he had made under his guidance and even received a stingy praise. But when asked by the master whether Knocker will return home soon, the dwarf thought. A month after the events in Florence, under the sensitive care of White's nurses, the prisoners began to gradually recover. Most of them wanted to stay with White, even the elves. However, after the terrible experiments of the tower, only Raymond survived, although he became a chimera. IG assumed that this happened because Raymond had a holy power in him. Unfortunately, IG could not find a way to bring Raymond back to life, he lacked information. However, Rosa is determined to find out what happened to Raymond and turn the tower upside down. Meanwhile, in his office, James lamented that in such a small settlement he had so much work to do, from finding the White family to the cat escaping from the convenience store, all on his shoulders. While James was wondering if he would be happier if he stayed with White, a beaming Rose came into the study with a question about the Magic Tower. The Magic Tower is an independent magical research group that has existed since ancient times. This is the only institution where the magic of the era of the disappearance of dragons was studied, a treasure house of knowledge. In the tower, with the help of powerful sorcery and knowledge, the strongest, the Lord of the Tower, Chaos, ruled over everyone. Rosa is a little upset that James didn't know Chaos's ultimate goal, but it's nothing. Instead, she asked if James could fight the Lord of the Tower with her. James was frankly confused by such a question and looked away, because to him betraying the tower and being in exile among all mages even sounded terrible. However, Rosa understood James's feelings and thanked him again for the information he had provided. James's conscience made him wonder if Rosa was afraid that this information would reach Caius. Rose just smiled because she really wanted to believe James. However, if he does tell, it's best if Caius tries to stop her if he can. Knocker was smoking on White's wall and thought that even this snowy landscape was not disgusting to him. It was probably worth lingering after all. Suddenly, a figure completely covered in snow fell down next to him. Knocker immediately pulled the man to Rosa and Ego, telling them what had happened. Meanwhile, the man came to his senses a little. It turned out to be San, an elven prince of the Light Clan, the same one who was looking for a place where he would not be persecuted. San came to ask for help on behalf of his clan. Sun insisted that the elves helped the humans out of goodwill, so now the humans had to return that goodwill. Rosa was quite enraged by his words, and Knocker already regretted picking up the elf. San tried to prove that when the magicians tried to create a chimera, the priests of the temple turned to the elves, and the elves helped them for the sake of peace and tranquility in the world. However, the magicians got angry and began to hunt the elves, captured them, and left them with no strength. Finding themselves in complete despair, the elves desperately hoped for the help of people. Rosa screamed that San had no right to hold her responsible for the independent decisions of each individual elf who chose to help. However, she suggested San to rest and try again. Rosa left, and IG approached San with a melancholy face, and with a wave of his hand took off his collar, which no one had been able to remove before. San nearly fell to his knees in gratitude. IG told San that the rescued elves from Florence were safe here for now, and this moved the elf. He promised to collect his thoughts and apologize to Rosa for his harshness. Rosa was in her room thrashing about with pillows and growling angrily in bed until IG came. He spoke very softly to Rosa and managed to calm her down. Meanwhile, San visited his elves in White's infirmary and breathed a sigh of relief. However, the elf's words about the fact that they themselves chose to help people hurt San's heart. It all started as a war between humans, but if the chimeras continued to be created, then the elves would end up in incredible danger, so this war was inevitable. Sun, burdened with heavy thoughts, watched Rosa in the greenhouse, trying to find a moment to talk. Finally, Rosie got fed up with this and called San over herself. However, instead of words, Rosa gave San a garden tool and asked for help. Seeing how the elf happily frolicked in the garden, Rose herself began to smile. She told San that she put a lot of effort into this place, and dreams that one day White will cover a dense and magical forest. Touched by these words, San bowed to Rosa and offered his apologies for the first meeting, which Rosa graciously accepted. Rose said that she will choose her own path, but every seed under the influence of the sun will surely blossom. San is impressed by her words and cannot take his eyes off the girl. Caius continued his experiments on the chimera and found that there is nothing more stable and suitable for experimentation than a child from the mother's womb. Such a chimera surpassed all. Meanwhile, the voice from the magic orb that Caius calls the Master is unhappy with the pace of work. By this time, Caius should have created the golem, but is still standing there. Meanwhile, Yggdrasil noticed that Rosa and Sun had become very close. They spent a lot of time together and learned from each other. Arthur tried to compliment Rosie, to say that Yggdrasil was praising her, but he felt a threat from the Archmage on his skin and pretended that nothing was happening. Rosa and Sun left, and IG with a sweet smile hinted to Arthur that he had forgotten his place. In the end, IG put San on Rosa on purpose, because she wouldn't mind the extra protection and a new friend. Kias reprimanded James through a magical connection for not yet learning how to create a golem. James tried to justify himself, but Kias, driven by fear, did not listen to him. Enraged, James asked Kias how he could use humans as materials for chimeras. Kias only replied that there is no difference between humans and animals. All who are not magicians are not worth living. A shocked James stated that he was not like Kias. However, Kias promised him that if James betrayed him, he would tell everyone in White Province who James really was. Meanwhile, IG once again asked Rose if she really wanted to go to the Magic Tower. Rosa did not understand what the problem was, because IG is much stronger than Kias. IG looked away and said there was something he didn't want to show. While Rosa tried to process what she heard, Sun asked if he could join the raid as well. Sun really wanted to help, and because of that he got permission to go with them, but IG was still against it. He said that it would be very dangerous in the tower, and he would not be able to guarantee Rosa's safety. In response to these words, James came out of the other room and said that he would also come with them. Rose was surprised, because James used to value the opinion of the tower mages very much. James replied that everything was fine, he really wanted to help. However, before leaving, everyone should listen to him. James's face was extremely worried at this moment. James returned to the tower, and Kias, extremely satisfied with his behavior, asked what the secret of making golems was. James opened his hand, which had a flicker of magic, and the next moment IG came out of the created portal with Rosa and San, and invited Kias to ask about the secret of the golems in person. Kias pretended to be glad to see the uninvited guests, but at the same time expressed surprise that James had been trusted despite his spying. However, IG knew everything from the beginning. Rosa angrily accused Kias of dark dealings with the Baron, elves, inhuman experiments, and the fact that the creation of golems was apparently necessary for the Emperor himself. Kias laughed in Rosa's face and said that despite all her words, they would not get out of here. A circle of dark mages appeared out of nowhere, ready to follow Kias's orders. Rosa screamed at the top of her lungs that they would definitely win, while IG quietly asked San to take care of Rosa if anything happened to him. San emphatically agreed. IG approached Kias and offered to reveal to him the secret of creating golems. Rosa cried out in fear from behind, but IG just smiled because everything was under control. Ig calmly explained that even if James exposed the method, it would not do anything, because only Yggdrasil himself could create golems. They were fragments of his memory. Kias nearly went mad at this and ordered his mages to destroy the narcissistic Yggdrasil immediately. Rosa was tempted to help, but San held her firmly in place. Kias was already rejoicing in his victory, because with the death of Yggdrasil, he would have become the strongest mage. But it turned out that the very stones of the tower protected IG without any additional charms. Yggdrasil approached Kias and told him that he was the true owner of the tower. In response to these words, the entire tower began to shake with an eerie hum. If we remember absolutely all the moments that were with us from birth to death, will we be happy for you? What will happen to our life then? The dragon who raised Yggdrasil told him about cognitive and emotional memory, and since IG didn't have any of them, the dragon created these cells as a gift. Jin, the tower golem, was the first to be created by Yggdrasil. Rose was surprised to realize that all the little golems in the place were actually pieces of Ygg's memory. Kias angrily protested that this was impossible since the tower was built 1,000 years ago. IG confirmed this, because then he created his Snow White Tower. Suddenly the cries of the victims and the results of the experiments and the voice of Kias began to be heard from everywhere. Desperately, Rosa covered her ears with her hands, if only to not hear all this horror. Rosa looked at Yggdrasil and understood that he had told his golem Jin to wait for him. Jin waited and waited, but Yggdrasil never came back, just abandoned Jin. Yggdrasil tried to talk to Jin, but he would not listen, full of pain and resentment. The tower began to collapse, and IG immediately picked up Rosa in his arms, taking her away. Rose screeched in fright as she saw black and purple clots of dark energy start pouring out of the tower. It was all the evil that had accumulated in the tower over this 1,000 years. However, in a moment it came to Rosa, and she began to rebuke Yggdrasil. He threw the golem, which was infinitely bound to him. IG tried to justify that it was his first golem, and he was scared. Rosa angrily said that despite all the reasons, IG should not have acted like this. Jin knew that he wouldn't come back, so he stopped waiting, which made him vulnerable and was able to be turned into a dark tower. San correctly noticed that now the tower and the area nearby will simply explode. Rosa asked if IG knew what he should do now, and he nodded his head very uncertainly like an archmage. Yggdrasil entered the trembling tower and asked Jin to stop, saying that he was very bored. The demon tried to prevent Jin from listening to his master, but she failed. IG apologized for his fear and said he would never leave Jin again. He could follow him if he wanted to. These words touched the stone heart of the golem, and it stopped collapsing. Playful petals of sakura sprinkled everything around, and the tower became snow-white again, as it was 1,000 years ago, cleansed of the many years of evil that tormented it. Sand captured Caius with plant magic and demanded that he voluntarily say that he was the one who injected humans and elves with what drugs. Caius said that he injected them with chimera genes, but all the subjects died. Enraged, Rosa screamed for Caius to immediately tell her how to bring back those still alive, but Caius replied that it was impossible. Enraged by this response, Sand gripped the plant's vines even harder in an attempt to kill Caius, but Rosa begged him not to, as Caius was no longer a threat. IG asked if Rosa was sure of her decision to let Caius go. Rosa answered that he would tell exactly how to return everything because he was afraid of dying, and then they would have to do it themselves. Yggdrasil encouraged Rosa that if they work together, they will surely find the truth and find a solution to save all the survivors. Rosa asked with interest how they could move the entire tower, but IG replied that it was not necessary. He simply told Gina the coordinates, and he himself moved to White. Rosa was delighted with such magic. She asked if Gina liked the new city, and, hearing an affirmative answer, properly introduced herself to him. IG asked if Rosa accepted the tower as a resident of the city, and Rosa said yes because Jean was alive. And she also planned to collect taxes from the tower from Iga's salary, so everyone was in the black. Rosa thought she knew very little about Yggdrasil's past and asked him if he was lonely. IG was shocked by these words, but replied that he did not remember much. IG assured Rose that now he had her, Jean, and White, he definitely wouldn't be lonely again. Rose shook out of him a promise not to hide anything from her anymore. San watched their conversation, and it saddened him to see how Rose looked at Yggdrasil with shining eyes, as she had never looked at him. Meanwhile, Caius made his way through the forest, muttering that he couldn't be defeated so easily. He could always start over, all his possessions and experiments. But suddenly a man in uniform with a sharp sword blocked his way. He thanked Caius for his service, but the Emperor no longer needed him. The man killed Caius on the spot. After Caius was killed, the man smiled and said that if Lady White and Yggdrasil dared to meddle in matters outside their domain, then he would have to visit them too. A few days later, the Emperor believed that Caius had actually just run off with the money because he was scared. However, he gathered a whole army just in case. The chief mage of the Empire cautiously asked the Emperor if he wanted to go to war against all the mages of the Empire. The Emperor replied that if he wanted to protect the magicians, he could give up the title right now. However, when the troops led by the Emperor arrived at the place where the magic tower was to fight the mages, it turned out that the tower was no longer there. No one could believe it. Yggdrasil decided it was best to leave the magic tower on the white border so that he could deny everything if anyone accused them of theft or complicity. James asked, confused if the mages would return to the tower. IG had high hopes for this. He had heard that many mages had left the tower due to disagreement with Caius's methods and actions. IG sent word to all these mages and left the entrance open, so now it was up to the mages themselves. James thanked him, but IG noted that James still hadn't received full forgiveness. The main thing IG wanted from James was to remember the same future James supposedly came from as soon as possible. James asked if IG would be the tower's master now that Caius was gone, but IG was too busy for that. However, if they do not have an applicant with the necessary parameters, then they will make one. In the city, the Dragoness Snow now worked as a teacher for the little dragons, and the children simply adored her. Gold, who came to visit her friend, was worried. White now has a lot of both humans and non-humans, but in the event of a conflict, their military forces are too small to give a worthy rebuff to the Empire. Meanwhile, Rosa saw that her secretary was sleeping on the job and threatened to turn off the heating if he continued like this. Margaret and Arthur are worried that the lady is not in the mood. However, in reality, Rose is upset because too much work has fallen on her, and because of this she has no opportunity to see the invisible Yggdrasil. Rosa was distracted from her sad thoughts by Sun, who had just finished another task. Because of his abilities, he became an indispensable courier for White. All the forest elves performed their duties without San, so he could continue to stay in the province. Rosa was very happy to learn about this, because this way she was able to translate some of her cases. It was about Dandelion's prophecy. Since the Holy Virgin was born to rewrite history, Those who go against her will be punished by heaven. San worriedly said that people were talking, as if the holiday predicted in the prophecy had finally arrived. The problem is that she is not alone. In the midst of a raging blizzard, 2 people were trying to reach the White Kingdom. However, the father moved with the last of his strength and soon fell under the desperate cries of his own child. The emperor allocated the most fertile lands to the kingdom of Asta, traitors to White. The lands that were closest to the remnants of the White to taunt the exiles every time. The nobles of Asta continued to laugh and taunt White's men even when they were forced to gnaw the bark off the trees from hunger. An incredible number of maidens claimed that they were the same holy maiden from the prophecy, but the most famous of them was Lady Asta. Lady Asta generously distributed gold to all the poor because she believed that all people should live equally. Rumors about her reached the empire. Rosa, meanwhile, thought that it was not a fact that the heiress of a cruel family would be the same as her ancestors. The more people in the world who do good, the better. Looking for her assistant, Eddie, Rosa went into the room and saw a handsome man who was just undressing. Gold was also nearby, who introduced Rosie to her husband, Shasta. Others gathered in the living room, and Eiffel, Snow's husband, introduced himself next. He vowed to be forever indebted to Rosie for taking care of his wife and child. Gold gently asked Rosa if she was concerned that the number of Inhumans in White's territory had increased. It was enough for Rosa that everyone was friendly to each other, but the size of the dragons was a little stressful. Gold replied that their husband's term of duty was over, so they would now remain with the White and could maintain the security of these lands. Rose was puzzled, because protecting dragons is something incredible. However, Shasta and Eiffel assured her that protecting one's home is the sacred duty of every dragon. While Rosa was admiringly thinking that no one in her life had seen so many dragons at the same time, San ran up with disturbing news about people outside the territory of the kingdom. The girl and her dad were brought to the city, and the poor girl cried and begged her father to wake up, to save him. These people turned out to be from Asta. Taxes were constantly rising in Asta. Besides, people began to fight for the right to receive gold from the lady. Life became more and more difficult, and therefore many fled from Asta. Rosa is surprised at how desperate these people must have been if they were walking through the snow-covered mountains, just for the rumor of a good life in White. At the same time, Rosa is angry, because she wanted to forget the grievances of the old days and be away from Asta. But the fake holiday left her no choice but to deal with the situation. Around the northern temple of Dandelion, people shouted the name of Asta. The lady herself enjoyed these shouts because she excessively believed that she was the saint, and no other way. While Asta was haughtily dreaming that Dandelion would soon reward her, there was a noise behind her, and Rose appeared in a luxurious outfit. She said that she wanted to pray, but apparently she was in the wrong place. In White, IG criticized Rose's attempt to sneak up on Lady Asta dressed as an assassin. In his opinion, Rose should have gone there as Lady White and no other way. The ceremony took place in the temple. In order to confirm the role of the saint, it was there that all the ladies who considered themselves holy virgins tried to get to. Yggdrasil insisted that Rosa should go there as a lady, and even volunteered to accompany her. Rosa was embarrassed to distract IG from his work, but he could not let her go without protection. While IG was arguing with San that there was no point in the elf going with them, Rose herself appeared. The luxurious royal outfit made her, and so incredibly beautiful, just fantastically attractive. Rosa walked past San, who was stunned by her beauty. She muttered that she wanted to deal with everything as soon as possible. IG showered the girl with sincere compliments. In the temple, the people of Lady Asta began to be indignant. How dare some girl interrupt the ceremony of the saint, and also enter the temple with the help of magic? However, Rosa ignored them. She sat down on the throne and in an icy voice asked Lady Asta if she had fun pretending to be a holy virgin. Lady Asta began to scream, and the priest declared that only kings and bishops were allowed to enter. However, Rosa was suitable in both parameters, because in the absence of a bishop in the country, the queen becomes him. Rosa asked Yggdrasil how long ago Lady Asta had started playing the saint, and when she heard that it had been 3 months, she decided to tell an instructive story. One king lived for himself. After learning that the poor were eating dirty water instead of bread, he offered them to eat crackers, because the king treated the poor as stupid. When he was told that crackers also needed money, the king simply gave money to the poor. However, if money appeared just like that, then who would want to work anyway? The wealth of the country was melting before our eyes. In order to fill the treasury, taxes were raised, which led to riots. By the time the king realized his mistake, it was too late, and his country had been taken over by stronger forces. Lady Asta was outraged that the story was an allusion to her, but it was actually the story of one of White's successors. However, King White at least realized his mistakes. Realizing what he had done, the king decided to surrender to the emperor, even with Yggdrasil on his side, if only his people would live happily. He was naive and incompetent, but he understood everything perfectly. Rose menacingly asked Lady Asta if she knew how many refugees from her country had frozen to death wandering the mountains while she played the holy maiden. Lady Asta stated that she was sorry to hear this, but there was no reason she should have known this information. These people made their own choice. No one forced them to flee. An angry Rosa offered to find out who the real Holy Virgin is. Lady Asta agreed, but reminded that the deceiver would be severely punished by Dandelion. Both ladies knelt humbly before the altar, and Rose turned to Dandelion, expressing her humility and willingness to accept punishment if she was wrong. The next moment, a pillar of light struck the temple, divine lightning that was supposed to settle the dispute. Before that, Lady Asta had time to think that there was no divine punishment. Meanwhile, the emperor found the blackened head of Baron Florence. He asked the new owner of the land why he did not get it, but the owner replied in fear that he was afraid of a curse. Prince Adrian coldly asked if it would be a lightning strike, and the owner confirmed it with horror because lightning was rumored to be the Holy Virgin's new punishment. The owner tried to approach the head, but lightning struck at the same moment, and he jumped back with a scream. The emperor angrily asked if he had seen the saint, but the owner had only heard rumors. Lady Rose White, with a stern face, looked in the temple at Lady Asta and all the priests who had been struck by lightning. She had no reason to doubt that she was a holy virgin. While Rosa breathed a sigh of relief that Yggdrasil did not miss with his magic, he found gold among the priests. Rosa immediately joined in, searching the pockets of the unconscious. When Lady Asta came to, Yggdrasil haughtily told her that even though she had no faith in a god, he was definitely on Rosa's side. The emperor is outraged that people believed in the sanctity of an unknown girl. He suggests that the priests somehow fabricated the data to deceive the people. According to the emperor, only when an enemy appears before the people, threatening their lives, will the people follow his army rather than the silent god. The emperor decided that if religion controlled people's hearts in the name of the Lord God, then he would control them through fear. He regrets that Caius did not have time to finish his quip. Prince Hadrian remarked that if they dragged on, the shadow would fall on both the emperor and the empire, so the disappearance of these men is a relief. However, the emperor categorically disagrees. The emperor reprimanded Hadrian sternly and declared that if they now had no countermeasures against the pope, Hadrian might be of use and learn something about this holy maiden. Adrian is found by his brother, Crown Prince Urien, and having learned about the news about the Holy Virgin, says that it is Adrian who should do this, because the crown prince should not waste his hands. Hadrian thought to himself that such a miserable successor as Urien was a real disgrace to the imperial family. Rumors about how lightning struck the temple where Lady Asta was even reached the ears of the Pope. She is sorry that the flow of donations has decreased, but people were seriously against Asta's impostor. When Papa learned that Lady White and Yggdrasil were in the temple, she assumed that the lightning was Ig's handiwork. Papa thought that Rosa was just a child who lured aristocrats on excursions. Papa is unhappy that Yggdrasil chose White, because if he had come to her, he would have received decent treatment. Her assistant noted that most mages did not like the religious order. Papa suddenly decided that she would really like to meet Yggdrasil. She asks Tina to help her arrange it, and Tina is willing to do anything for Papa Lillian. Meanwhile, James is training in spells on Gina, but it's all in vain. All his attacks fly, as if mirrored, at James himself. Yggdrasil remarked that he had asked James not to hit so hard, and in general he should have tried again, but James had no mana left. Snow's students crowded around and began to mock James, saying that he was still on the 5th circle of enchantment, but 10-year-old Ari from the grocery store is already in her 3rd year. While James was thinking that a 10-year-old shouldn't know the magic of the 3rd circle at all, Yggdrasil cheered him up with a lightning bolt and forced him to continue training. Rosa thought in her office that Asta had promised not to cause any more problems. The issues of the Holy Virgin were closed, and she could still enjoy peace and quiet a little. At this time, Tina unfolded some kind of scroll and dreamily thought that she would soon see Yggdrasil again for the first time in a very long time. When Sun first approached Rosa, he was offended by people, said hurtful things to her, but she still forgave him and saved his people. Because of her tenacity and beauty, it didn't take long for San to fall in love with Rosa. Her silky silver hair, rosy cheeks, deep eyes like the night sky, all this drove San crazy. Even subordinate Sana noticed that he fell in love. A guileless elf who has never dated anyone has finally fallen in love? Rosa asked Gold if James had been training well, and she replied that Yggdrasil was constantly competing with James, never giving him a moment to rest. Rosa remarked that James should have just inherited magic instead of going through this kind of abuse, but Gold replied that it was only possible for Yggdrasil. Since the beginning of time, magic belonged to dragons. If humans hadn't betrayed them out of greed, they could have coexisted, allowing magic to evolve over time. After a long conflict between the two races, the dragons found and killed all the original mages except those who fought on their side until the end. Rosa knew that IG was special, and Gold instantly told her that she could always just go and see him. Rosa began to deny that she missed Yggdrasil. The mages to whom the invitations were sent began to receive replies with many gifts. One of them was Tina, the famous beauty of the tower with incredible black hair. Rose bemusedly assumed that the black hair was a type of Yggdrasil. She flew out of the room to Gold's laughter, and her imagination began to paint lewd images. San, who was just sat in the greenhouse because of Rosa's beauty, suddenly saw her next to the horse. The whole world went dim, all but Lady White. Rosa asked San for a favor. She wanted to change her hair color. San could create a temporary illusion and apologized before touching what he thought was the most incredible silver hair. And while Sun thought the original Rose was gorgeous, he couldn't help but notice that the black one looked great on her too. Rose was very grateful for the help and rushed to Yggdrasil. While Rosa was driving and wondering if Igu would like her new look, Yggdrasil was just blasting James's magic all over the training ground. Suddenly Yggdrasil saw Rosa's hair and froze. He frantically wondered where he had gone wrong, and whether this was what is commonly called a teenage rebellious period. Little Rose felt very lonely at White's. She had no one to talk to because everyone was always busy worrying about the kingdom. But everything suddenly changed when Yggdrasil returned from a business trip where he had been missing for several years. He immediately found a common language with the girl, and she was happy. IG cautiously asked what had happened to Rosa's hair. Rosa tried awkwardly to say that black is a very beautiful color, but IG dispelled the illusion with one touch, because Rosa's real hair is simply incredible. IG asked Rosa who had cast the spell, and when she replied that it was Sun, he became furious with jealousy. If the spell was held this far from the mage, then it was cast by touch. Rosa, meanwhile, was asking James how his training was going, and the fierce Yggdrasil decided to lash out at James, saying that he would definitely reach 7 Circle by Rosa's 60th birthday. Watching James cast the spell, Rose asked why she was hearing the words. IG explained that human magic and dragon magic were quite different. James tried to fight the dragon's magic with his own human magic, and it was quite an ordeal. Rosa knew it would take a long time, but IG told her not to miss him. Rose initially denied it, then stated that Yggdrasil preferred brunettes anyway, and then tearfully cried out that he had promised to give her everything. Yggdrasil tried to calm Rose down. He said she would regret it when she grew up. Asking him for such a thing is like saying, "I want to live with my dad forever." These words hurt Rosie. She says that IG is not her father and she would never want one, then tearfully shouts that IG is a fool and runs away, forbidding her to pursue him. San was waiting for Rosa in the living room, but she came running in tears and asked him to leave, because she needed to be alone with her feelings and pain. Rosa cried piteously on her bed and wondered how IG could decide that she didn't understand her feelings. She did not expect a confession, but such cruel words hurt her. The girl hugged her golem, which IG had created for her as a child, and realized that it was a part of Ig's feelings. That is, just like this golem, he was worried about her. But does he love her? Due to the excitement, Rose became ill, and Margaret, in despair, found the only true solution, to immediately inform Yggdrasil. While James was showing off his achievements to IG on the training ground, a mailbird arrived. Seeing that Rosa was ill, he immediately dropped everything and rushed to her room. However, as soon as Rosa saw IGA, she threw a pillow at him and ordered him not to enter without her permission. Yggdrasil outside the door was in despair, for he had promised that Rose would never cry over him again. As a child, Rosa cried a lot when Yggdrasil went to another country with her aunt, because she believed that he loved her, but he should love Rosa. In fact, IG only accompanied his aunt to her wedding. When Rosa heard what marrying was, she immediately declared with a serious and sweet face that when she grew up, she would definitely marry Yggdrasil and made a promise. As Rose fell asleep, Yggdrasil entered the room. He apologized for hurting her and wondered if she remembered that old promise to get married. IG believed that this was a phase of teenage angst. When Rosa grows up, she will definitely find someone she wants to marry, a man who can grow old. The magician imagined a picture of how Rose would greet him next to her, and his heart sank painfully. However, he promised the golem that he would not cry now, not for anything. An angry San entered the room. He suspected that there was something wrong with Rosa, and now he accused IG of putting unknown charms on Rosa, entangling her with them. Yggdrasil tried to force an apology out of Saga for touching the lady, but Sun menacingly asked if Rose knew she was now forced to live forever. However, Yggdrasil sternly stated that Rose does not know and should not know, because when she stops needing IG, he will simply disappear along with his curse. The last Princess White to receive divine power was always on the verge of death. This gift is a curse that destroyed her life. Once upon a time, Yggdrasil and Rose swore to each other that they would always be there for each other. IG, who will forever protect the princess and take care of her, Rosa, who will accept his devotion. Confused, San asked what this all meant, and IG revealed that he had bound his magic to Rose's godly power so that she would not die before her time. And when the time comes, he will break his oath and everything will disappear. Rose will live the rest of her life as an ordinary person because she does not need divine power to exist. Therefore, Sun should not worry, but keep everything a secret from Rosa. When Rosa woke up, there was no one around. However, it seemed to her that she could still feel IG somewhere nearby. Her lovemaking was interrupted by Sun, who brought warm water. Rosa was instantly happy and said that she is now in complete order. She invited San to drink tea, which he gladly accepted. In the garden, Rosa wondered if San, an elf who lives longer than humans, thinks humans are like children, and if he could fall in love with a human. San was confused, but answered that everything was possible. San decided to do everything to make Rosa choose him, so he told her that if he fell in love with a human, he wouldn't hesitate. He will remember every moment and be the happiest in the world. IG was in his office trying to get his thoughts in order, when suddenly James appeared next to him. Someone was waiting for Yggdrasil in the living room, an unexpected guest. Meanwhile, Rosa was glad to have talked to San. She was only 16, but she promised herself and IGA that she would become a gorgeous woman that he would definitely fall in love with. Tina was Yggdrasil's guest. Yggdrasil greeted her and told her that there was a place in the tower. Tina could even become the new owner of the tower, but she did not come here for that. Tina revealed that Papa Lillian had sent her personally because she was concerned that he was wasting his time in such a tiny area. Shadow was ordered to lead Yggdrasil to the temple. Considering their old friendship, Tina was absolutely certain that Yggdrasil would follow her without a word. Rose came to the magic tower to see Yggdrasil. On the way, she was met by James, who reported that the magician had a guest, a very beautiful magician named Tina. Bewildered, Rosa immediately rushed to Yggdrasil's room and found him there with Tina in a suspicious position. IG blushed instantly, and Tina calmly approached Rosa as if nothing had happened. Rosa got angry and Tina was acting very annoying, constantly pretending to flirt with Yggdrasil and teasing Rosa about her feelings for the Archmage. Tina stated that she and Yggdrasil had a special relationship, and Ig immediately started yelling that Rosa had misunderstood everything, that they were just old friends and nothing more. IG said that he doesn't have many human friends left due to the fact that he doesn't age, so Tina can be considered quite unique. Rosie doesn't like it all anyway. Tina told Rosie not to worry about her and IG, then whispered in her ear that she wished the two of them good luck, which finally confused the princess. Tina demanded an answer to her invitation and told Rosa that she had come to personally invite Yggdrasil to the temple, to Lillian. Lillian was the only one who stood by and did nothing when the women pretended to be saints. She was silent when people were busy raising funds to make the temple richer. Rosa insisted that not even the Pope could order a personal mage to come and go as he pleased. However, Tina came only to deliver a message. Rose awkwardly asked Iggy if he was going to accept the invitation, but he just looked away. He asked for some time to think about this decision. In the Imperial palace, Urian asked a certain man if he had really seen a dragon. A man confirmed that he had seen a baby dragon in a cave in the White Mountains. Urian is surprised how the white people remained safe. He offered to pay the man handsomely and send a soldier to lead them to the cave. Urian looked at Adrian and smiled because his father entrusted him with a personal task. Instead of dealing with the Pope's plans, Urian had to find the real dragon. Hadrian heard in the market that the merchants had hired the Florentines and wondered if the whites were wealthy enough to pull this off. Even if they changed the baron, it's a lot of money. Until recently, the whites survived by doing a tourist business for the aristocrats of the empire, and now they are financially independent and influence the empire. How is this possible? Hadrian's servant begged him to come to his senses and not make dangerous decisions, but Hadrian still decided that he would go to the whites alone so as not to attract attention. Rosa was sad in her room because of the situation with the invitation. She terribly disliked the whole situation, and especially the fact that IG would go himself to a place she was not aware of. IG went into the room, and the first thing he asked was if the princess would throw pillows again. Rose blushed and turned away, but promised that she would not. IG tried to start a conversation about the day they had quarreled, but Rosa covered his mouth with her hands and screamed that he should not say a word, but something else. Yggdrasil decided to accept the invitation, but not because Tina was his friend or out of fear of the Pope. He would do it for Raymond, who neither he nor elven magic could heal. The temple contains holy water that is rumored to cure anything, and permission to use it was Yggdrasil's most important condition for a visit to Lililan. Yggdrasil has sworn to protect everything and everyone Rose loves, so he must keep his promise. Rosa was touched by these words and realized that she had behaved like a child. With a smile, the princess asked IG to return after his duties, and he happily promised her to do so. In the middle of a snow-covered forest, a group of men complained about the cold and wondered what they should do if a dragon really appeared in the cave, which could not be defeated so easily. However, one of the soldiers smiled and said that according to the man, there was a baby dragon in the cave, and it was easy to deal with it. What's more, the Imperial mage made a special collar for them. As soon as it is fastened around the baby dragon's neck, he and his parents will obey all the commands of the owner. He gave up everything, even the throne. Whoever had driven White into the mountains wondered if he would retain his dignity even after he reached the bottom. Who knew that in the future there would be such a weak emperor in the empire, and the White royal family would not die out, but would interest everyone? Hadrian understood that with such an emperor, the empire could collapse. Either he was unlucky or he was cursed, and all because he was reborn a second time in this world. Hadrian walked through the snow and thought that even for him this journey was dangerous. Suddenly he was met by Knocker, who mistook the prince for an ordinary lost traveler. Snow and Ethel enjoyed their daughter and each other. Ethel asked if Snow had closed their cave, but the dragoness had forgotten to do so. They decided to go there together. Little Eno asked to go with them, and the family decided to have a picnic and even bring along Eno's best friend, Red. Rosa was dissatisfied with the fact that holy water flowed only in Tehi. Why was it not in the land of the whites? IG tried to explain that it flows only on holy land. Rosa angrily remarked that she had prayed before too, but Yggdrasil only laughed, because angry children's cries at nature didn't really count as prayers. It was here that Rosa met a family of dragons. The children joyfully invited her to the picnic with them, but unfortunately, Rosa had to refuse. She had too many things to do. Suddenly there was a loud noise. Rose assumed it was thunder, but Yggdrasil's face instantly became serious and tense. James trained hard, and the children supported him. However, when he was already exhausted, a cry for help was heard. A stranger was near the tower. Adrian stared at White's walls. Knocker drove him, but in time, Hadrian made a deal with Yggdrasil. In exchange for the banishment of Hadrian and his descendants, he was not allowed to enter White territory without permission. Suddenly, the castle walls shook with a menacing roar, and Hadrian was instantly reminded of Yggdrasil's words that the punishment for breaking the oath would be severe. Hadrian drew his sword and prepared to defend himself. Knocker tried to restrain Jin, but the golem was completely unresponsive to the dwarf, consumed by the old order. James ran up to them, just as the golem had already grabbed Adrian in its fist and was about to crush him. James recognized the prince and shouted that he could not die. Yggdrasil came to the shouts and commotion. His face was icy, and he saw no reason why Adrian should have survived. However, he still ordered Jin to release the prince. The walls of this golem only reacted against White's old enemies, and thus Hadrian was their enemy. However, Yggdrasil instantly recognized him, because his face had hardly changed. Yggdrasil grabbed Hadrian by the collar and pulled him to him. He would never be able to forget the Emperor's face. IG asked how he dared to come here and slapped Adrian hard. Rosa also ran to the commotion, whom Arthur tried to stop. Right before her eyes, Hadrian drew a dagger and plunged it into Yggdrasil's heart. Rose screamed in sheer terror. Yggdrasil, however, with a smile drew the dagger from his heart and with words of a good attempt struck Hadrian cold. He went on, beating the prince. IG stopped only at Rose's cry, her request to stop. Only then did he recover a little and realize with what eyes Lady White was looking at him. James ran up to Yggdrasil and covered Adrian with himself. Despite accusations of imperialism, James stated that Hadrian was to become emperor. He saw it in the future. Hadrian, in James's future, opposed the creation of chimeras from dragons. He insisted that the dragons were too strong and there was no need to fight them, but the emperor stood his ground. Urien also laughed at his brother and said that he was just boring. Hadrian realized that such arrogance would ultimately destroy the empire. Yggdrasil coldly replied that the future is not permanent, that Caius is no longer alive. James cried out in despair that the future could change, but people could not. James asked to pardon Hadrian, not for the sake of the prince or the empire, but for the sake of the dragons and the people who lived peacefully side by side, begged to believe him at least once. Rose took a full chest of air and in a clear voice asked to lead the prince inside. She wanted to see for herself what kind of person he was. Under the double onslaught, Yggdrasil surrendered. He decided to trust James, but he had to watch over Adrian himself. I don't care about the empire, as long as it doesn't interfere with White's affairs. IG also congratulated James on reaching the sixth circle. He healed Adrian without saying a word with pure power. James could not believe that he had succeeded. Hadrian in prison is not too pleased with James's behavior, but James replies that he did it for the sake of the dragons and to never again see the fiery landscape of the destruction of the world. Hadrian is surprised that dragons still exist. Hadrian had no answer to James's question whether the emperor or the crown prince had ever spoken of dragons. Hadrian didn't want to sit back and watch these idiots destroy the empire, so he decided to help James and do everything he could to stop the future. Rose stood guard over Yggdrasil and tore off his clothes, trying to look at the wound. To her surprise, there wasn't even a trace left on Ygg's body. He was too strong to be harmed by such an attack. Rose sobbed and buried her face in Yggdrasil's chest. She took a promise from him that he would not die so easily, would not leave her alone. While Rose is determined to tell the dragons everything for them to decide, Gold is alarmed by how long Snow and Eiffel have been blocking the entrance to the cave. Rosa also began to worry a little about the long absence of Snow and Eiffel, but decided to deal with it later. For now, she needed Gold's help. Yggdrasil, meanwhile, placed magical handcuffs on Hadrian, despite his assurances that it was unnecessary. However, IG still could not fully trust the prince. Suddenly, there was a loud roar, and Gold appeared in front of a shocked Adrian with a dragon face. Rose decided to frighten the prince and sway him to her side in this way. Rose, dressed in an elegant outfit, jumped off Gold's back and stood menacingly in front of Adrian. She made it clear that the dragons had every right to know what concerned them. In the throne room, Rosa began questioning Hadrian why he had come, whether he would have killed her if not for Yggdrasil. Hadrian honestly answered that he had been brought here by rumors about the Holy Virgin and nothing more. Rosa asked how they punished uninvited guests in the Empire, and Hadrian replied that they sent them to prison. That wasn't enough for Rosa, but Yggdrasil gave her a great idea. First, Hadrian had to stop the Emperor and Crown Prince, and second, spend the rest of his life atoning for White in any way he could think of. Hadrian bowed his head and swore by his full name that he would fulfill these conditions. Rose was satisfied, but there was still punishment for trespassing on White's land without permission. Yggdrasil was happy to take away the magical power of the sword from Hadrian, his pride. Rosa slyly said that if she behaved well, one day she might return it. Snow and Eiffel suddenly entered the hall. Yggdrasil immediately knew something was wrong. Snow began to throw herself at the dragon and screamed in a terrible voice for the child to be returned to her. Earlier, Snow's daughter had asked her friend Red not to go so far, but the boy was determined to find the animal that had been playing with them in the cave. The girl fearfully followed her best friend, who had disappeared into the bushes, but suddenly froze, and her pupils widened in terror. Gold rushed to her friend in despair, trying to calm her down. With poorly hidden fear in her eyes, Gold asked what happened and where the children were now. Eiffel, without further ado, grabbed Adrian by the throat and began to accuse that the Prince of the Empire was definitely to blame for what happened to their children. Adrian insisted that he had no idea what had happened. However, after the words that the baby dragons were kidnapped by the soldiers of the Empire, he realized that the Emperor did know something about the existence of dragons. Snow was sobbing on her friend's shoulder that she was a terrible mother, and now she couldn't even smell her own daughter. Gold reassured her as best she could, and Adrian said he could help. Eiffel did not believe him, but Rosa intervened, noting that Eiffel would hardly want to kill innocents in a blind rage. Rosa had a plan to free the children. In the dungeons of the Imperial Palace, Urien looked contemptuously at the little dragons in the cage and scoffed at the fact that these crumbs were powerful and terrible dragons. However, it was lucky that they found them. Red tried to bite Urien through the grate and he jumped back in fright. Just in case, the Crown Prince checked with the court magician whether the dragon powers were securely sealed. The Emperor entered the dungeon, who was not stingy with praise for his eldest son. The Emperor already saw how his empire would become the most powerful in the entire world. Meanwhile, Adrian, Snow, and Eiffel arrived at the front gate. They were surrounded by a guard, but Hadrian sternly ordered them not to even move in their direction unless they wanted to die. The Emperor and Urien came out to the din. Adrian humbly said that his captors had something to say, and Snow growled menacingly for her children to be returned to her immediately. The Emperor began to pretend that he didn't even know which children they were talking about, but in the next moment Eiffel shifted into his dragon form and roared so that he could be heard throughout the empire. The Emperor still tried to twist the situation to his advantage. He remarked that without cooperation the dragons would never find their children, so they should obey him. Snow coldly snapped that the Emperor had completely forgotten the mistakes of the past. Dragons are proud creatures, they will not trade for their children, but will simply burn everything here to the ground and take their own. Rosa, meanwhile, was worried about whether she had done the right thing by letting these three alone. Yggdrasil reassured her that their arrival now would only make things more difficult, which was the right decision. Hadrian yelled at his father that he had to trust the dragons. Blackmail wouldn't work. The Empire is already the most powerful country on the continent. But the Emperor did not want to hear it. He had little power and influence. Hadrian replied that a country weakens when its ruler weakens. The Emperor could not bear such words and accused Adrian of all sins, including the fact that he was captured. The Emperor, in a blind rage, shouted for his soldiers to immediately take up arms and protect the future of the Empire. Angry Eiffel at this moment quickly flew into the sky. Eiffel directed his magic directly at the Imperial Palace, destroying it almost completely in a matter of seconds. Frightened soldiers dropped everything and ran away. Even Urien, who supported his father's crazy plans, watched the destruction of the palace with abject horror in his eyes. The Emperor was already continuing to call for battle. Adrian ran up to Urien, grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, and demanded to know where the baby dragons were. Hadrian asked if all this destruction was what Urien really wanted, to be Emperor of the Wasteland. The Emperor, crushed by the debris, wheezed and begged for someone to save him. Snow towered over him and coldly said that there was no one who could save him now. Snow asked one last time where her children were. Adrian replied that here he and Urien brought the baby dragons out of the dungeon. Snow immediately burst into tears and rushed to meet her children. Eiffel, seeing that the children were all right, instantly turned back into a human and happily hugged his wife, wiping away her tears. At this time, Urien tried to help his father. The Emperor shouted at Adrian, "How dare he give away the dragons?" Adrian asked Eiffel to stop, as was agreed. Eiffel agreed, but only the innocent were to survive. Eiffel stretched out his hand and struck the Emperor and Urien with magic. Only ashes remained from them, and Eiffel ordered Hadrian to remember this day forever and named him Emperor. The dragons flew away, and Adrian wearily thought that this was exactly what the dragons wanted to show him, that everything that was built on blood could disappear at any moment. Stunned residents of the capital watched the mighty dragons with frightened looks, and then in unison they began to shout praises and glorify Emperor Hadrian. Snow was rocking Ino in her arms and looking distantly at one point somewhere. Eiffel, who had just arrived, began to worry about his wife's condition and asked what she was thinking. Snow asked if the decision to stay among the humans was wrong. However, the man reassured her, because this place only helped them. It's just that not all people are like the inhabitants of White. Rosa thought that Hadrian had indeed become emperor, as James had wanted. but she was worried that the Empire now knew about the existence of dragons and could be up to something bad. Gold informed Rosie that they had opened teleports to White across the continent, so now anyone who wished to trade with them was free to do so. Gold suddenly told Rosa that the Empire was very unstable. If Lady White is able to connect the human and non-human worlds, her influence in the world will increase several times. At first, Rosa angrily protested that she was not interested in uniting the continent under her power. She already had too many things to do. But in fact, this idea sounded very attractive and did not leave her head. Rosa's only goal was to live in comfort with her people. But now great mages, legendary dragons, dwarven wizards, dashing elves, and incredible people lived with them, and she loved them all. Rosa saw Raymond's house and asked if he hadn't come back from the hospital yet. However, Raymond was just passing by, only he looked different now. His hair and skin had darkened. Rosa asked what happened to him, but Raymond replied that it was a long story and invited the lady to his house. Inside it was clean and tidy, like Raymond himself. After Raymond went through all kinds of treatments to reverse the curse, he ended up in a gray area and decided to accept his fate. Rosa asked how exactly Raymond's body had changed, and instead of answering, he grabbed a dagger and stuck it in his hand. Rosa managed to get scared, but the dagger fell apart from the blow. However, Raymond still decided to go with Ego to the temple because he tried so hard to help. Rosa thought that it was not necessary to send a dark force to the temple and asked for Raymond's hand in marriage. Rosa tried to heal Raymond with her divine power, but even that was useless. Raymond assumed Dandelion didn't want him to heal. The next day, Raymond said goodbye to Rosa, but she asked him to return as soon as possible because his place as a holy knight was still waiting for him. Rosa looked worriedly out the window. Raymond still hadn't returned, and she was waiting for him until the demon hunt began. Gold asked in surprise what it was. Every winter, when the continent was filled with demonic monsters, the Pope would send holy knights on a hunt. There are always a lot of demons in the White Mountains, and they are all ready to fight. Rosa was worried that it would be difficult for Arthur to fight alone, but Gold rightly noted that he was not alone. There were many who wanted to join him. And indeed, in the yard, Arthur trained others. People complained that there were not strong enough opponents for them to spar, and Shasta, slumped in his chair, watched everything. When Shasta got tired of this, he sighed and said that he had no choice, turned into a formidable dragon, scaring everyone who wanted to train. The girls just laughed at that. Gold noted that White would have fun for a while, especially with the event being more important than the demon hunt. This event is Lady Rosa's birthday. The Sand chastised himself for missing the recent events. He should be there for Rosa and protect her. However, his assistant noted that Sun was on an important mission. While Sun and his assistant were discussing a gift for Rosa, Knocker came up to them and asked them to give Rosa the incredibly beautiful jewelry that he had made with his own hands. San, in turn, prepared for Rosa an apple from the Tree of Peace, which bears fruit once every 100 years, but he was not sure that she would like the gift. While Knocker and Sun lamented that it was all a trifle, because the dragons had decided to give away territories in the mountains, the golems thought that they had just baked a cake last year. That was not enough. While the golems were concentrating and sweetly discussing what they should do this year, a small animal ran nearby. The golems decided that they should catch him as a present. Yggdrasil told Rosa that celebrating her birthday was a great idea in this harvest year. Rosa turned to Igor and asked if he had prepared a present for her. Yggdrasil smiled slyly and said that his present was a surprise. Rosa would find out what was there only on her birthday. Rose pouted but accepted these conditions. Meanwhile, satisfied golems approached them. They pulled the fabric from their prey, and Rosa was instantly moved by the sight of such a cute little animal. However, Yggdrasil immediately said that he would confiscate the gift and picked up the animal by the withers. Rosa did not understand what the matter was, but this animal was a small demon. Rosa couldn't believe it, but Yggdrasil explained that animals that were brutally killed or mistreated could sometimes be reborn as demonic beasts. Yggdrasil asked for a moment to try to clean the fox cub and took out a miniature flask of holy water. The IG was afraid that this amount would not be enough, but the fox cub cleared. Apparently, it did not have much demonic energy. The snow-white animal looked very cute. The golems nearby were upset that they brought such a dangerous gift, but Rosa was still very grateful to them. She just asked them to be more careful. Rosa asked if Raymond would be treated the same way. However, it turned out that its treatment requires enough water to completely submerge, and it will take several days. Yggdrasil warily said that he had to go after Raymond himself, as once he got to Tehi, all communication was lost. Rosa was instantly angry. How dare the priests keep Raymond hostage? IG sighed and said that he had hoped to leave White later, but it seems he was left with no choice. Yggdrasil solemnly promised Rosie that he would return soon and with Raymond, and she accepted the promise with shining eyes. In the temple of Tehi, Papa Lillian kicked her feet on the bed in displeasure and kept asking when Yggdrasil would come. Tina reassured Lillian that it would be very soon, because Raymond was with them. These words immediately cheered Lillian up. She jumped off the bed and began to demand that Tina cast a skin-moisturizing spell on her so that she would look flawless in front of the Archmage. Lillian called Tina with her to the chapel because it was time for some mysterious ritual. She felt it was her duty to everyone on the continent as Pope. Lillian was one of the many orphans raised by the religious order of Dandelion. She would have been sold somewhere if her divine power had not appeared before 10 years. By chance, the bishop saw how Lillian saved the dog with her power, and since then she had to train to become a saint, a puppet in the hands of corrupt bishops. Little Lillian knocked on the door in the dark room and begged to be let out, and she was only asked if she heard the voice of God. She was told to pray that Dandelion would answer. Frightened and hungry, Lillian begged not to be left here alone. She promised not to cry anymore and to pray a lot, but they left her in the room without light. After some time, while swimming in a pool of holy water, an almost unconscious Lillian saw blue butterflies. She became the owner of even greater power than the bishops had. Time passed, and as Lillian's pride grew, so did all those who used it. So she became the Pope, the most powerful religious figure in the empire. Lillian began the ritual and told Tina to make sure no one entered. Tina obeyed, thinking that Lillian had been stuck in the body of an 18-year-old for 2 centuries. Lillian at the holy water, which for some reason is black, thought that Dandelion remained very far from everyone. He wanted her miracles to spread around the world, but this world now belongs to Lillian. Tina listened in silence to Lillian's words about Dandelion, just watching from a distance. People loved Lillian more, until Dandelion did not show himself and did not withdraw. Lillian asks Dandelion to stay high in the sky forever, and not even dare to take away what Lillian has achieved. Such is her proud, mocking, and self-confident prayer. Yggdrasil felt a strange energy around him from the very first second of his stay in Tehi. He immediately decided that this place was impractically extravagant for a main temple. However, in the next second, the guards already sensed the distortion mana, and assumed that this mage must be crazy if he dared to invade Tehi, the Holy Land. Yggdrasil grimaced at such disrespect and calmly showed the guard the invitation personally written by Pope Lillian. The guard turned pale from what he saw. The next moment, the sentry's sword flew out of his hands, and Yggdrasil forced him to bow in a deep bow, rearing the impolite guard thus. Tina, who was already waiting for Yggdrasil, asked if he could stop taunting the guard and follow her, as Lillian had been waiting for the Archmage to arrive for a long time. However, Lillian was not very interested in Yggdrasil. He asked to see Raymond, for whom he came from such a distance before meeting her. Yggdrasil was led into a magnificent hall where a hunched Raymond sat on an ornate chair. IG couldn't believe his eyes. He expected to see something completely different. IG leaned over to Raymond and asked what happened to him, if he could hear him. Raymond should have been cleansed by now, but for some reason he was still full of demonic energy. A small servant entered the hall who announced that he had been sent to serve the great magician. Yggdrasil asked for mint tea and the boy bowed and disappeared. Yggdrasil, who had already guessed what was happening to Raymond, directly asked the demon who possessed his body who he was. The demon just smiled and said nothing. When the tea was served, the demon winked at Yggdrasil and asked him to stop staring and just drink his tea, because Ig would soon drill a hole in it with his gaze. Yggdrasil angrily asked why the demon did not answer the question, and how the priest saw through him. The demon snickered, pleased that someone finally understood his essence. When asked what the demon had done to Raymond, he replied that it took possession of his body after Papa refused to cleanse him. In fact, the priests were perfectly aware of the demon's presence. There isn't enough holy water in Teha to cleanse even the Pope, and besides, it's all rotting, so no one thought to help Raymond. Yggdrasil was shocked by what he heard. This could not be. The demon leaned closer and asked Yggdrasil if he was a mage. Since IG looked strong, the demon defiantly offered him a duel and find out which of them is stronger. Yggdrasil coldly refused. The demon did not expect this and began to offer to tell everything he knew if IG won. However, Yggdrasil saw no point in fighting a demon that wouldn't last 5 seconds. Yggdrasil assumed he had been gone too long if a weak demon unable to enter the world without a contract was asking for such a thing. He asked the demon if Lucifer had told him about the mad dog. The demon looked shocked. He asked in a trembling voice if Yggdrasil was referring to the same rabid dog that defeated the demon lord Lucifer. Yggdrasil grinned and said that he had promised Lucifer then, if even one demon disturbed him, then Yggdrasil would destroy the entire demonic world with all its inhabitants with his own hands. The frightened demon flew out of his body in an instant, and an unconscious Raymond fell on the couch. Yggdrasil, meanwhile, thought that a demon in the Holy Land was something completely wrong. Yggdrasil was distracted from thinking that he had been called here, and wasn't even going to try to help Raymond by Lillian, who had just entered the hall in a sumptuous outfit. Yggdrasil grinned back and greeted Pope Lillian. After all, they had too many things to discuss, as Lillian herself knew. Meanwhile, Rosa, getting ready for the new day, asked Margaret, who was combing her hair, if she knew what IG had prepared for Rosa's birthday. Margaret is clueless, and Rosa decides to ask James. Margaret remarked that she only had to wait until tomorrow, and Rosa, who was not really thinking of a gift, asked if she would be punished if she hated Pope Lillian. Yggdrasil looked sternly at Lillian and asked why Raymond was still not healed, since he had promised to meet with Lillian only if he was cleared of the disease. Lillian bowed to Yggdrasil and said that he misunderstood her. She promised to try, but did not guarantee success. Lillian lied that Raymond had been in this form for a long time and therefore nothing worked. Lillian tells tales of her duty to use the holy water in the best way possible, and that Raymond himself would prefer it to be used for the good of others rather than his body. Yggdrasil was unmoved by the stinging words that Lillian would never forget Raymond's sacrifice. He coldly asked what Lillian wanted in exchange for the hostage, at which Papa took offense. However, Lillian said that she actually wanted to propose to Yggdrasil in person. She offered him to stop spending time with White and be with her, and he would get anything in return. Yggdrasil scornfully pushed away Lillian's hand extended to his face and said that she would not be able to give him what he wanted. Lillian tried to manipulate Raymond, but to no avail. Yggdrasil said that he had no idea that the Pope would turn out to be even more insidious than the mages. Is Lillian willing to waste a lot of holy water on herself but not willing to share it with a holy knight? While Lillian did not understand what Yggdrasil was talking about, he leaned over and asked if she could not smell the stench of a rotting corpse. Lillian instantly yanked her hand away and jumped away. Yggdrasil had always found it strange that a godly power that took away life's span had allowed Lillian to live so long. However, even a corpse that ends up in holy water will become like a living body. First, long ago, Yggdrasil decided that Lillian had made a deal with the devil. With these words, he looked very expressively at the cold-blooded and strong Tina. However, Yggdrasil now saw the truth. All of Tehi's holy water and all of Tina's magic could not hide the true state of Lillian, who was a walking, decaying corpse. Lillian laughed. She stated that it is always easy to recognize one's own kind, but Yggdrasil did not consider himself to be the walking dead. He lived forever for other reasons. And the main thing that distinguished Yggdrasil from Lillian is that he still hasn't lost his human heart and soul, unlike her. Lillian froze at these words, and IG refused her offer. Lillian was desperate. She was sure that Yggdrasil would understand her. She hoped that he would understand all the pain of her endless lonely life and sympathize. While Yggdrasil was waking Raymond and putting his shoulder to take the knight to White, an angry Lillian decided that she would have to go to extreme measures. The door didn't open to Yggdrasil, and it wouldn't open until Lillian wanted it to, because everything in Tekka belonged to her completely and utterly. Yggdrasil looked at his hand in confusion as he failed to open the door. Lillian blocked all his magic and laughed desperately, pleased with herself. Suddenly, Yggdrasil remembered the information he had read in an ancient document about divine objects. Lillian's necklace was just like that, which is why you could feel the divine energy coming from her. Lillian noted that now Yggdrasil should have given up, because he realized that he couldn't handle her. However, all Yggdrasil's thoughts were only about Rose, to whom he promised to return. Enraged, Lillian swung her staff and shouted that in that case she would personally inform Lady White that her Yggdrasil would never return home. Yggdrasil thought frantically what he should do. The earrings protected against all physical attacks, and the necklace suppressed magic. Lillian squealed with satisfaction that in her field of vision, Yggdrasil could do nothing at all. Yggdrasil smiled and suddenly threw the still unconscious Raymond out the window. In front of a bewildered Lillian, he created a portal outside the window where she couldn't see. Raymond fell into the portal and Yggdrasil, wasting no time, rushed after him. He was already jumping into the glass pierced by the solid body when Lillian recovered and fixed the window. Yggdrasil hit his shoulder painfully against the stone window and fell. It was a nice, desperate attempt, but Lillian wasn't going to let him get away with it again. In the evening, everyone drank to the health of Rosa's birthday girl and had fun at the festive white. All relatives and friends, people and non-people, were nearby. Rosa, in a charming holiday dress, watched everyone with a smile, happy that all these people were around and enjoying themselves. However, at some point, she decided to go outside. San gave Rosa a puzzled look as his assistant nudged the elf to the side conspiratorially and declared that this was the perfect moment. San had to take the chance. Rosa thought sadly that Yggdrasil still hadn't returned. He asked her to look at the sky at midnight if he was late, but Rosa still believed that the magician should have shown everything himself. A comet lit up the sky and Rose made a wish, that all the inhabitants of White would be happy, that White would also have holy water, and that Yggdrasil and Raymond would return safe and sound. Meanwhile, San, gathering his strength and determination, entered the balcony and headed towards Rosa, who was still standing with her arms folded. Rosa heard the question about wishing for a shooting star and looked around awkwardly. Sun smiled gently at Lady White and asked if she would mind if he joined. Rosa didn't mind and asked if Sun had made a wish too. Elves didn't do that, but San thought it was a fun tradition because humans put a lot of meaning into special things. Sun said he understood the reason. He imagines what it feels like to want something so badly that you're ready to wish it on a fallen star. Rosie was moved by his words. Sun asked if Rose was waiting for Yggdrasil, and Rose instantly turned red and pale. She didn't think it was so obvious, but IG never missed her birthdays. San swallowed the heavy lump in his throat and asked if Rose loved Yggdrasil. Rose was stunned by these words, and in a trembling voice clarified why Sun was asking this now. The elf touched her hair and replied that Yggdrasil was not suitable for Rosa. While she tried to understand his words, incredible fireworks began to explode in the night sky. Rosa instantly forgot about San's words and looked at the sky with rapt eyes. As a child, she always begged Ig to make fireworks, not understanding that it was very expensive, but Yggdrasil remembered her wish. San looked away and bitterly whispered that he would lose to Yggdrasil even when he wasn't around. He understood that he would not be able to compete with the Archmage in Rosa's heart. In a desperate rush, San leaned over to Rosa and softly whispered happy birthday in her ear. Rose blushed all over from the wave of heat that swept through her body. Suddenly, they noticed something strange in the sky. It didn't look like part of a firework, more like another star flying brightly straight towards the White Palace. Rosa and San rushed after the star, and breaking through the bushes, found a shining lake on the lawn, in which Raymond lay unconscious, and a divine beast stood over him. Rosa immediately rushed to Raymond, begging him to come to his senses, while San nearby said in a daze that it was real living water. Rosa could not believe that her wish had come true. San was sure that it was indeed holy water, especially considering that there was a divine beast standing nearby. Only now did Rosa notice the tigress looking at her. Rose awkwardly held out her hand to the tigress, and the tigress nuzzled her nose, purring contentedly. Rosa realized that she had already seen Elizabeth as a child, but thought that she was her imaginary friend. At that moment, Raymond opened his eyes and Rosa rushed to him in a panic. She asked what happened, if Raymond was okay, and what happened to Yggdrasil. Raymond firmly stated that IG was in danger. Meanwhile, in the Temple of Teki, Yggdrasil, chained in magical chains, sternly told Lillian that she could not keep him here forever. However, Lillian was going to hold him until IG agreed to stay. Yggdrasil stubbornly refused all Lillian's offers, but she only smiled confidently and said that sooner or later she would find a way to bind IG to her voluntarily. Lillian said she knew about the contract with Rose and that Yggdrasil was protecting her life with his magic, and so, if she takes Yggdrasil's power, then Rose will die too. Yggdrasil was in despair. Rosa believed that they should have run immediately to save Yggdrasil. San next to her tried to stop her, to make her think things through and not make hasty decisions. Rosa understood San's imitation, but the main question that tormented her was Yggdrasil. She returned to San with tears in her eyes and said that she had to save him. Elizabeth, who heard all the desperate words of Rosa, suddenly began to increase in size. The tigress became bigger than all of them, and Rosa realized that the tigress was inviting them to sit on her. Raymond, cleansed and now human again, determined that he must go with Rosa. She tried to deny it, but Raymond was adamant. All three sat on the tigress. Yggdrasil, shocked by Lillian's cruel words, asked why she was doing all this. Lillian smiled. She wasn't about to let someone else have what she couldn't have. Lillian assured Yggdrasil that if he remained on her side, she would allow him to keep the magical contract with Rose and ordered him to choose. Yggdrasil closed his eyes in agony. Rose's sudden scream echoed through the hall. Through the divine portal, the three of them appeared out of nowhere on Elizabeth's back, and Yggdrasil froze, shocked by what he saw. Rosa angrily screamed at Lillian to return her most precious mage to her immediately, her face and voice full of fierce determination and hatred for Papa Lillian. Yggdrasil was puzzled, thinking that Raymond was an idiot. He didn't just come back, he brought Rosa with him. However, IG then noticed that Raymond's skin had returned to its vivid color. Lillian congratulated Rosa excessively, but refused to give Yggdrasil to her, because from now on the Archmage was to stay with her forever, because only he could understand the pain of those who live forever. Lillian noted that Rosa would live a happy life under Yggdrasil's protection, but had she ever thought about how Ig would feel after Rosa died? Rosa replied that it was selfish, but she wanted IG to be with her. She perfectly understood how he would be sad when she died, because she also had to say goodbye to those she loved. Rosa clenched her fists and said that she was not worried about the future. She just wanted Yggdrasil to be around, sharing lots of happiness and smiles with her, because then they wouldn't regret when they said goodbye. If Yggdrasil wanted to stay with Lillian of his own free will, then Rosa was ready to let him go. But if it was the fact that Lillian held him by force, then Rosa would never give him up in her life. Lillian laughed and said that she didn't need Rose to give her anything, since Yggdrasil already belonged to the Pope. Lillian declared that Rose would not be able to overcome a true holy maiden, and Yggdrasil yelled at Raymond to grab Rose and run as fast as he could. Raymond covered Rosa with himself and drew his sword. Lillian sneered that the treacherous holy knight had chosen the wrong side this time. She must end his life and hand it over to the god. Raymond brought up the sword and replied that the only good thing about being in a coma was that he actually got to see God. Lillian was not afraid of the knight, because she was protected from any attacks by divine objects. However, Raymond's first powerful blow achieved its goal. He dismembered Lillian's body, as well as all of her divine objects, because he was acting with Dandelion's power and the false festival could not stop him. The guards heard Lillian scream and rushed to the hall. San, meanwhile, summoned his plants and tightly blocked the entrance to the hall, and also pulled Yggdrasil out of the trap. Lillian shrieked that her divine objects, her luxurious body, everything disappeared because of this blow. Tina was next to her and hugged Lillian, trying to calm her down. Raymond sternly stated that Dandelion had promised him to take every last drop of the power Lillian had given him. Lillian screamed desperately, covering her face with her hands. Tina watched with pity as Lillian cried and whispered that she was a saint. She ruled this world. Dandelion had never paid any attention to Lillian, so why did he suddenly decide to strip her of everything? Rosa could not stand this pantomime and slapped Lillian with all her might. She was frankly fed up with all this mindless chatter, because every person is the protagonist of their own life. While Lillian was coming to her senses, Rosa snapped that she didn't care if she was Papa or God. In Rosa Lillian's life, she was just an annoying secondary character who played no role at all. In Rosa's mind, Lillian's unhappy life gave her no right to hurt others. Only a mask in Rosa's life did not dare to offend the people she loves. Lillian whispered that it was not fair. Why couldn't she get everything with her power? People like Rosa, who were born with a silver spoon in their mouth, will never understand Lillian's pain. These words enraged Rosa and slapped Lillian again, shouting that she knew nothing about her and had no idea how hard Rosa had worked all her life to get this. Lillian seems to be fixated on what she doesn't have. With her wealth and power, she could do anything. That is the power of a saint. If Lillian wanted to be loved, she had to be kind to others. Desperately, Rosa swung again, but this time the slap landed on Tina's cheek, who desperately covered Lillian with her. Tina begged to understand that Lillian had no power left and she would die quickly, giving back the time she had taken. Tina said Lillian wasn't always like this. Surrounded by people who flattered Lillian for their own gain, she simply did not learn how to love or be loved. And although this did not justify her behavior, that is why God punished her. Tina bent down to the floor and begged Rose to give Lillian a little time, just enough for her to come to terms with herself before leaving this world forever. Rosa thought she was struck by Tina's desperation. Yggdrasil said that Tina should not have stayed here any longer. She was free and could join them in white, live a new, happy life, not serve the crazy Lillian. But Tina was not forced to serve Lillian. Ignoring the general disapproval, Lillian brought her to tea when the mage tower threw Tina out of use. Tina apologized to Yggdrasil and said that if she had the power and strength, she would do to the world whatever Lillian wanted because she was Tina's savior and goddess. Tina shrewdly said that of all people on Earth, Yggdrasil should know exactly how she felt. Yggdrasil thought about his own feelings for Rose and agreed. A weak and barely alive Lillian walked beside Tina and asked why they had to run away from Tehi, since this was their home. Tina replied that it would be better for them to wait away from the city for now. Lillian also complained that her skin was terrible and asked for a moisturizing spell, because if she is not beautiful, then no one will love her. But Tina countered that she already loved Lillian, and there was no need. Meanwhile, Yggdrasil cautiously asked Rose if she was very angry. Rose in tears threw herself on his neck with hugs and reproaches that he was still late for her birthday. Yggdrasil hugged Rose tenderly in return and thanked her from the bottom of his heart for saving him. Rose is a true heroine in Yggdrasil's eyes, and he was not ashamed of his feelings. Suddenly, Rosa turned to Raymond and said that if he could still communicate with Dandelion, he should tell him that next time the god would take out his own garbage. Raymond laughed, but unfortunately he had already lost contact with Dandelion. However, according to Raymond, God is limited in what he can do directly, and that is why he needs people like Rosa. Yggdrasil asked what happened to Raymond's body, how it was healed, and Rose told him that a star had fallen in white which formed a pool of true holy water. Raymond said it was a gift from Dandelion to Rosie, and he also gave a message. Rosa White will be the next pope. This statement shocked everyone present. Raymond tried his best to persuade Rosa, but she did not agree to his words. Even Yggdrasil had to step in and say that Raymond wasn't some merchant offering goods. Raymond begged desperately to remember the words Dandelion himself had relayed through him. However, Rosa is sure that the Pope should have been loyal and sacrificed himself, but she is not like that at all. Rose shouted that unlike the ghostly Dandelion, she was Raymond's boss and could be offended in general. Raymond replied sadly that the Pope's place could not remain empty. Rosa stated that Raymond could have misinterpreted Dandelion's words because it is very difficult. Unlike Raymond, she had never seen God or even heard his voice. Compared to the ruler of a small territory, the Pope has more authority. No Dandelion-respecting kingdom would look down on Rose, but she has so much to do with white. Rosa reminded herself once again that all she ever wanted was to live happily and peacefully in white with her people. Her desperate cry was interrupted by Gold, who had just walked in. Gold apologized for interrupting, but Rosa's dream had expanded a little last night. Gold didn't have time to say anything because Rosa disappeared, but the dragons brought their gift to Rosa. Gold showed on the map that they had acquired the territory from the White Mountains to the Mark, which is not much, just a finger on the map. Rose sighed because it was a map of the whole world. The gift included Pilia, an area in poverty, and Asta, which was still recovering from the economic upheaval caused by the false holiday. The contract was already signed. Rose shuddered nervously, trying not to cry, and Yggdrasil instantly announced to everyone that he just had to discuss something with Rose alone. He opened a portal and disappeared with her. Yggdrasil took Rose to a quiet place where she could cry properly under a tree. When Rosie was relieved, she thanked Igu sincerely, because he had sensed that she needed a rest. Yggdrasil remembered that he had once asked Rose to tell him if things got too difficult for her. Rosa asked if that was the time he offered to run away with her if she asked. Yggdrasil confirmed, but Rose remembered what she had said afterwards. She is Lady White, why would she run away from her own kingdom? Little Rose angrily said that IG had two options, to become her personal magician or to remain an ordinary citizen who would have to pay taxes. IG did not forget that threat. Rosa sullenly said that she didn't even think of running away, because it doesn't look like she will be able to run away from the god. Yggdrasil observed that there was one place where the god could not reach. Rose was already happy, but Yggdrasil said that this place was a demon world. Rose asked if IG was sick, but he said honestly, Dandelion really couldn't get there. Demons are weak to godly power, and with Yggdrasil it would be easy for Rosie to dominate their world. IG could have sworn that Rosie would be incredibly suited to the role of ruler of the demonic world. Rosa was not at all interested in such an offer. She asked Yggdrasil that if she turned down a bad path and became like Lillian, then he must stop her at all costs. Yggdrasil just smiled back in satisfaction. Meanwhile, Rosa looked around and asked where they had ended up. Aegis replied that it was Epirus, the city where the archbishop lived. Rose immediately lashed out at Yggdrasil. He brought her to the worst place. However, Yggdrasil noted that Rosa, as a bishop, should have made a recommendation regarding the next pope. While Rose realized that she could recommend Raymond and thereby relieve herself of a heavy burden, Yggdrasil added that Dandelion would definitely choose Raymond, since Rose was still too young. Moreover, Raymond is fully qualified to be the new pope. Yggdrasil took Rose's hands and asked if he had ever taught her to sacrifice herself for others. Yggdrasil smiled slyly and said that they should make the first move before Raymond contacted the other bishops. Rosa thought that IG looked like a thief now. Rosa began to question whether it would be right to dump this position on Raymond just because she didn't want it. Besides, Raymond could be right and Rosa really should become pope. Annoyed, Yggdrasil pulled Rosa's cheeks. He asked again if she had slept through the lessons he taught her to use others instead of being used. Yggdrasil warmly said that Rose gives everyone strength just by smiling around her, so she doesn't have to carry all the burden on her shoulders. She always has someone to lean on. Yggdrasil smiled and declared that to him, Rosa's wishes were far more important than the wishes of a god, so he would gladly take the blame for Rosa's refusal to be pope. Epirus looked simply luxurious, and this surprised Rosa, because she thought that this city was decayed and poor. Yggdrasil remarked that it was a long story, but it all began with the Empire. Technically, the Empire serves Dandelion, but the Emperor wanted to become a god himself. Because of this, the Pope and the Emperor took offense at each other. The Emperor mocked the religious order, driving the poor inhabitants of the Empire to Epirus and ignoring their needs. Rosa is angry at the cruelty of the Emperor. The Archbishop has the power to choose the Pope from among the candidates proposed by the bishops, but then the Archbishop has no power over the Pope and cannot force him to do anything. Since Papa Lillian was hardly performing her duties properly, Yggdrasil suspected that Archbishop Brad was working in her stead. He was probably the only one who saved the inhabitants of Epirus. The inside of the room looked even more luxurious than the outside. Rosa and Yggdrasil were met by a small servant who asked the purpose of their visit. After hearing the answer, the clerk said that registration on the first floor would cost 1 copper and 2 hours of waiting, on the second floor 1 gold and 10 minutes. Rose grimaced and realized how Epirus had made so much money. Yggdrasil thought that the maid would ask them on each floor until they got to the top. IG paid 10 gold and asked them to be taken immediately to the 5th floor. There was enough money, and while the maid was leading them, Rosa remarked that the Archbishop must have looked a lot like her. Rosa noticed that there were a lot of children in the temple, and Yggdrasil said that the Emperor demanded taxes even from the inhabitants of Epirus. But the priests did not pay taxes, and so Brad saved the poor. While Rose awkwardly remarked that the idea of making priests of the whole city would suit her more than the Archbishop, it turned out that this is exactly what Brad did, rubbing the Emperor's nose in it. On the 5th floor there were many doors, in front of each of which stood a servant. It turned out that they had to try each door for 5 gold and search on their own. Rosa got angry and ordered Yggdrasil to destroy all the doors at once with magic. All doors will cost less than 5 gold to repair, saving time and money. The doors may have looked luxurious, but they were actually made of cheap and low-quality material. The servant nervously began to stammer and say that they could not do that. Suddenly, a short old man appeared nearby and kindly asked Rosa and Ego not to disturb his priest too much because he was already here. It turned out to be Archbishop Brad himself. Brad invited the guests into his office and offered them tea and cookies. Rosa looked angrily at the treats and asked if she had to pay for them too. Brad laughed and promised he wouldn't have to pay for the treats. Most likely, the priests mistook them for aristocrats who came to buy an indulgence from the Archbishop. Rosa was surprised. The indulgence was usually sold in the papal city. Brad explained that the indulgence was special because he personally forgave people of their sins. Rosa couldn't believe that people were actually coming for an indulgence, but Brad pointed out that it was a good thing for the sinners to do, since they were paying and the money was helping Epirus. Brad offered to cut to the chase, calling Rose a bishop who never did his duty. Rosa countered that Brad had never approached her, so there was no need. Yggdrasil questioned if it was true that the Archbishop was on bad terms with the Pope, and Brad confirmed. Lillian stopped contacting him, and he also stopped visiting her. One day, Brad asked Lillian for some grain to feed the people of Epirus, but she completely ignored the request, because if you don't feed the poor, they will soon disappear. An angry Brad stopped going to Tehi after that incident, Where was it heard that a messenger of God would say such things? From now on, all money was spent only on Epirus. Brad suggested moving on to the purpose of Rosa's visit, but she was already ready. Lady White held out her hand and said she would only provide Brad with the amount of information he would pay for. While Brad wondered if he would be interested in the information, Rosa hinted that her words would be directly related to the candidacy of the next pope. Brad held out a copper coin and said that it was interesting because there can be no candidates when the pope is alive. Rosa smiled and said that he was simply not aware that Lillian had disappeared. This information already attracted a silver coin. Rosa said that Lillian did not disappear, but received a punishment from the god, which was delivered by a divine knight. Brad doubted the authenticity of Rosa's words. However, Rosa interrupted that she was only here to convey information and to check on Brad's business. She will announce everything else after paying 30 gold, but if you don't pay now, then all 60. Yggdrasil laughed with satisfaction, and Brad understood that Rosa was a very businesslike and intelligent girl. Without hesitation, he slammed the wallet with the required amount on the table. Satisfied, Rosa began to sing that the candidate for the next pope should be the knight who delivered the divine message and told how fantastic Raymond was and how suitable he was. However, Rosa did not finish. She said that the candidate she would not strongly recommend is herself. Brad did not understand why Rosa said that she did not recommend anyone. Rose reported Dandelion's words. However, she categorically disagrees with God and believed that she would not make a good pope. This is a terrible mistake. Brad asked why Rosa thought so, and she answered, Rosa is not a believer. No one even knew that she was a bishop. She tells her people to believe in themselves and work instead of praying. Also, Rosa did not want to seem rude, but she categorically does not approve of indulgences. Brad has no right to forgive anyone. That right belongs to the victims and only to them. Rose continued that the whole God business was just for the money, and Brad laughed because it was. However, the only way to help the poor in Epirus is to sell indulgences. Brad decided that if he had to stand trial in front of Dandelion for this later, then so be it. And he also looked at Rosa, full of strength, and she reminded him of young Lillian. She is fair and honest, strong in spirit, and works hard for her goals. Besides, she has divine power. The more Brad thought, the more certain he was that the perfect pope would come out of the Rose. Rose yelled that Brad simply hadn't seen Raymond in person. Since the archbishop's duties include getting to know the candidates, Brad asked to be invited to White. Yggdrasil whispered to Rosa that the escape message was still valid. Rosa asked him not to joke like that, but in fact Yggdrasil was completely serious. Raymond, who saw Rosa, rushed to her. He was very worried when she disappeared. However, Rosa said that she had to introduce him to someone and called the archbishop. Raymond could not believe his ears, and when he actually saw Brad, he fell to his knees in front of him and crumbled in the formalities. Brad replied that it was unnecessary. However, Brad couldn't help but notice that Raymond was indeed dating Dandelion. He had never seen anyone with such a strong aroma of dandelions in his life. Raymond was simply living a miracle. Brad had asked Raymond to give him a tour of White, and Rosa had happily given his approval, glad that now Brad would make sure of everything himself. During the tour, Raymond asked what brought the archbishop to White and learned that he was evaluating candidates for the next pope. Raymond was glad that Rosa had done her duty after all. Raymond was noticed by children on the street and at the same moment joyfully ran up to him to say hello and ask how he was doing. Brad was happy to see the kids have Raymond as a friend. Brad asked if Lady Rosa was also a friend to the children, but they seriously replied that she was not a friend to them, but rather a part of the family, an important reference point for everyone. In the fireplace hall, Yggdrasil asked Rose not to worry so much. No one would force her against her will. But Rosa was thinking about Lillian and whether White would be punished for refusing along with Rosa. However, Yggdrasil reassured Rosa that Lillian's punishment was only because she stopped even trying to be a good person and allowed the darkness to flourish. Rose sighed once they had to worry about basic things like cold and food. Now things were much more complicated. Yggdrasil asked if Rose missed the times when they were just the two of them on a tiny patch of land. Rosa was not sad, but Yggdrasil was a little sad. Rose caught Yggdrasil's penetrating gaze and instantly turned away. She suddenly wondered if White had ever had a place for prayer practice. Raymond just led Brad to the former chapel. Now it turned into a warehouse and was cluttered to the point of impossibility. The mildest Brad said was unacceptable. Raymond promised to clean everything quickly. Brad, meanwhile, thought that if he became pope, he would be the perfect leader with true faith and genuine character. On the other hand, if Rose becomes pope, she will root out the deep corruption in the religious order and the papacy, but there is no guarantee that the temples will not end up like this chapel. San looked into the chapel and greeted Raymond. Brad was surprised to see an elf here, and Raymond explained that White was home to many different races. When Brad heard that San's elves were helping in the fight against the creation of chimeras, he bowed low to him on behalf of the entire order. However, Sun no longer held grudges against people. Sun said goodbye and left, and Brad thought with admiration that Rosa White had made those who had completely lost faith in people trust them again. Gold pondered what land they should buy next, but Shasta rightly pointed out that it didn't make much sense because Rosa didn't look happy. Eiffel and Snow also agree that this is not a good idea. San, who was passing by, noted that the expansion of territory for dragons would also affect elves, so that was good, but it was really better not to tell Rosie. With that, Sun dropped a whole pile of scrolls on the table. It was all mail for Rosa to deal with. Lots of business. At that moment, Rosa and Yggdrasil also entered the conference hall. Rosa was sure that it was already late and everyone was tired, so they had to deal with everything quickly. Rosa's gaze fell on the scrolls and she was instantly upset by the amount of work. Sun tried to apologize, but Rosa replied that she should have been clearing the mail anyway. Rosa saw the letter with Lillian's seal and pulled it first. Yggdrasil instantly felt a terrible premonition and tried to stop Rosa, but he didn't have time. The seal broke. Magic circles hung in the air. White was struck by a pillar of red light, and Rose was enveloped in a terrible glow that lifted her above the ground. No one could even approach her to help. However, Yggdrasil knew what to do. He threw back the spell, grabbed Rose, and dispelled the remnants of the magic circles. The scroll burned, and Yggdrasil pressed the frightened girl to him. Yggdrasil said with a fearful expression that it was a crest that only Rose could activate. The coat of arms that would take her to the demonic world, once and for all. San worriedly asked if Rosa was okay. Yggdrasil, who put her to rest, replied that she would soon come to her senses and everything would be fine. It just took a little time. Sun confusedly said that he shouldn't have brought that letter, but Yggdrasil countered that only Rose could have activated the spell, so Sun wouldn't suspect anything, even if he wanted to. Yggdrasil thought intently that this spell was not one that a low-level demon could create. This is only possible with the permission granted by the highest-level demon. Yggdrasil decided to go to the demonic world and find out for himself what was happening there. San was surprised and even asked if everything would be okay with the Archmage. Yggdrasil poked San, but he replied that it was no joke. If something were to happen to the Archmage, Lady Rose would simply not survive it. Over breakfast, Rosa asked Brad if the tour went well. He replied that the candidate for Pope Raymond had made an excellent review, and Raymond choked because he still did not know what the candidate was. Brad said that Raymond has incredible potential, but he still wants Rose to be the Pope. However, he understood that she would not agree, and therefore offered something. Brad asked Raymond to go to Techie and act as interim Pope on behalf of the Archbishop. Brad will elect the next Pope in 3 months, and all bishops must nominate candidates. Raymond grumbled that he wasn't worthy, but Brad countered that he had seen God with his own eyes, so no one could do better. And Brad himself wanted to take a break for a long time. Brad understood Rosa's views. It would be problematic to put her in the place of the Pope if she was not an obedient bishop, but he could not ignore God's order either. Rosa will act as bishop for the next 3 months and must help those who have suffered from the epidemic that has spread across the continent. Then her appointment will be considered fulfilled. Yggdrasil was concerned that Rose agreed, but she replied that it was only for 3 months. In addition, she felt embarrassed because she used all the holy water only for her own needs. Yggdrasil said he hadn't told her about that demonic letter yet. Most likely he would have to go to Tehi, and he wouldn't be able to accompany Rosa on her healing mission. Sun asked if Yggdrasil had really decided to go to the demon world on his own. IG confirmed, because that way he would be invulnerable to the demonic flow of time, which was very different from the human one. Plus, Yggdrasil knew the Lord of the Demon World, so he could talk to him calmly. San asked if Yggdrasil would tell Lady Rose, to which IG just looked away. Rose reassured Yggdrasil that she was no longer a child, and that she would be fine. San was immediately summoned to go with Rose. Followed by Golden Knight Arthur, she would be safe. Yggdrasil thought again that if Rosa found out exactly where he was going, she would be worried, so he said he would join her when he was done with his business. Yggdrasil reflected that Lady Rose was no longer a child, and the two of them were no longer alone. Wasn't that what he always wanted? Rosa would no longer have to fight alone, and it was Yggdrasil himself, not her, who was actually not ready to go. Late in the evening, when the Archmage was looking out the window and chasing his thoughts in circles, Rosa came to him. She asked if anything was bothering Yggdrasil, as he had been looking strange all day. Yggdrasil smiled at the fact that Rosa wanted to listen to him. She had grown so much. His words touched Rosa, and she clarified whether he really considered her an adult now. Yggdrasil looked away and confidently said that Prince Sun was very interested in Rosa. She should take a good look at him. These words made Rosa's lips tremble. Rose asked with pain in her voice if they really couldn't do anything, no matter how hard she tried. Yggdrasil sheepishly replied that she deserved someone better than him. Rose took a deep breath and said that no one could convince her, not even Yggdrasil himself. So she'll pretend she didn't hear what he just said about Prince San. Rose wished Yggdrasil good night and left. Yggdrasil followed her sadly, thinking that things were not meant to be, that she actually chose him because he was on her side. Yggdrasil returned to his thoughts. He decided that once he dealt with the demons, Rose would be fine without him, and that would be the end of their journey together. Meanwhile, a lower demon came to Lord Lucifer in the demon world and confessed that they had failed in their task. Lucifer was annoyed. He lent his power to the demon, but even so he could not cope. However, he had other ways to achieve what he wanted, to catch Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil said goodbye to everyone before traveling to the demon world. Arthur was surprised that Lady Rose wasn't with them, but Yggdrasil said she probably wouldn't be. Upset, Rosa just looked at everyone from the upper floor through the window and sadly turned away. It was too painful for her to say goodbye to Yggdrasil. Down below, the Archbishop thought that his plan had finally started to work. At this time, Elizabeth approached him and beckoned him to follow her. The little tigress led Brad to a pool of holy water. Seeing this miracle with his own eyes made the Archbishop feel ashamed that he still doubted White and checked them. The first thing Yggdrasil brought to Tehi was Raymond. They were instantly noticed by the same guard who had once kept Yggdrasil in and turned pale from one look. The priests in the temple were outraged. An ordinary divine knight broke into the temple with the statement that he was the temporary pope. However, a certificate from the Archbishop quickly put them in their place. Yggdrasil threatened that he did not even know how Brad would react if he found out that his words were questioned and offered to obey Raymond for 3 months. Raymond thanked Yggdrasil sincerely. He wouldn't have been able to do it himself. Igu was only glad to see the priests so helpless. However, he asked if Raymond remembered anything about the demon possession. All Raymond remembered was the evil laugh and the words that he would die soon anyway, so his body would be borrowed for Lord Lucifer. Rosa, meanwhile, angrily threw things into her suitcase and thought that Yggdrasil was an idiot for daring to crush her feelings like that. Arthur, who entered, asked if he could come later. Rosa replied that everything was fine. She was just packing. Arthur hinted that if she wanted to wait for Yggdrasil, they could leave tomorrow, but Rose wasn't going to wait for him. Yggdrasil found the door to the demon world right in the temple of Tehi. He couldn't believe that she would just be hidden in the basement like a trinket. With a frightening look on his face, Yggdrasil stated that he had once warned Lucifer what would happen if he bothered, and stepped into the portal to the demon world. Lucifer, the king of the demon kingdom, the lord of fear and terror, was in his position for a long time until the madman appeared. It took him a lot of strength and time to rebuild the demon kingdom after Yggdrasil turned it upside down, but the period of suffering was finally coming to an end. While Lucifer was rejoicing in his plan, there was a terrible roar behind him, and the wall was blown to pieces by the explosion. Angry as 1,000 devils, Yggdrasil crashed right into the demon's room. Hitting Lucifer with powerful magic, which sent him flying to the other side of the room, Yggdrasil asked what he was doing. Did he really want to die? However, Lucifer looked to Yggdrasil as a savior. He cried out desperately, begging Yggdrasil to become the king of the demon kingdom this time. The Archmage did not expect this. Once upon a time, Lucifer saw many of his subordinates hanged on a tree and learned from an assistant that it was the handiwork of a mad mage, Yggdrasil. When Lucifer asked why, one of the demons who were still alive said that Yggdrasil was annoyed by the small demons that were stirring under his feet. Lucifer ordered to bring the magician to him. After a short battle, Yggdrasil declared that the king of the demon kingdom was gone. Lucifer humiliatingly gave Yggdrasil the right to rule, but he wasn't interested. Instead of a title and rule, Yggdrasil only took all the treasures that Lucifer and the demon kingdom had. He left him 1 gold coin, and Lucifer howled with resentment and anger. Lucifer repeatedly asked Yggdrasil to take the place of the ruler, because he defeated him, and it was simply impossible to stay on the throne with such disgrace. In the present, Yggdrasil was still annoyed at such a request, but Lucifer sent sealed letters to all the priests and popes to find IG and drag the demons to the throne. When Yggdrasil asked why Lucifer contacted priests and not mages, the demon replied that no mages had the power to summon him. They all drowned in idleness and laziness. While Lucifer was rejoicing that his plan had worked after all and Yggdrasil had come to the demon realm, he grabbed him by the collar and menacingly asked who the demons were that were sent to Earth. In Castle White, one of the golems was very sad that he could not go outside the city. Margaret tried to calm him down, but it was all in vain. The little fox saw how his golem friend rushed past in tears and decided to follow him just in case. The two of them ran all the way to a snowy clearing in the forest outside the city. Suddenly, someone's steps were heard, and a young demon appeared with them, who was very happy to have at least some kind of prey. He searched for a long time for something that would be connected with White, and finally fate smiled at him. Meanwhile, Lucifer told Yggdrasil that in these days a man cannot be distinguished from a demon. There is nothing holy left in people, and that is why the demon wanted to know more about the world of people. Yggdrasil vehemently denied that demons were not supposed to interfere in human affairs directly. They were only supposed to wait until someone decided to contact them. Yggdrasil asked if Lucifer worked with Pope Lillian. Lucifer thought for a moment and then said that he felt sorry for Lillian. One of his assistants worked with her. Yggdrasil realized that things were very bad in the papacy. There was something sly in Lucifer's eyes, and IG asked confused if he was sending demons anywhere besides priests. Lucifer smiled. He had indeed sent someone to find out more about Yggdrasil himself. He was the same demon that was currently hunting the golem and the fox cub on Mount White. The demon reached out to the golem. He felt a certain magical energy and really wanted to see what was inside the stone. The fox growled menacingly, warning the attacker. The little fox jumped up and with all its might grabbed the demon's hand with its sharp teeth. He screamed in pain, but the next moment he pushed the fox away with his magic. With horror in his eyes, the fox watched as the demon tried to split open his golem friend to get what was inside. Gathering his strength, he clawed at the demon with his teeth once more. The demon screamed and wanted to kill the fox cub with one look, but suddenly his arm was shot off by magic. It turned out to be Eiffel, which was just patrolling the area nearby. Eiffel conjured many ice arrows and killed the demon on the spot. Snow, who was nearby, stated that they had to stop the demons and protect White while Rose was away. Suddenly, Snow gasped and fell to her knees. When a frightened Eiffel approached his wife, she showed him Yggdrasil's memory stone inside the dead golem, which had cracked. A sudden sense of threat shot through Yggdrasil like a bolt of lightning. He grimaced and bent in half, frantically trying to analyze the feelings and understand what was wrong with the golem. Lucifer asked what happened, but Yggdrasil only asked to continue the story. The demon showed him all the contracts people had with demons and all the letters they had sent. One of the names was Rosa White. Lucifer suggested that it might be the mistress of Yggdrasil. Something was catastrophically wrong with Igor. He was breathing heavily and leaned on the table. Yggdrasil saw Rosa's name and began to wonder who she was. Well acquainted with the White family, he did not understand when they managed to make a new heir. Or maybe it was another branch of the clan. Yggdrasil had to urgently get to the Whites and deal with everything. Lucifer addressed him as His Majesty, and Yggdrasil nearly killed him on the spot for saying so. Lucifer gave Yggdrasil the seal of the Demon King because such a thing would fit the Lord incredibly well. But the Archmage angrily threw the seal out the window. He was not going to the throne. The demon clung to Yggdrasil and begged to kill him first and then go somewhere. He could no longer be in this place, but Yggdrasil was only annoyed by these requests. Yggdrasil asked if the chaos in the demon world was not the handiwork of Lucifer. Would this be possible if he had no authority? Everything that happened in the demonic world was a confirmation of his power. Finally, Yggdrasil declared that if Lucifer invaded White Land again, using his demons or magic, he would simply destroy him on the spot. Tired, Yggdrasil clutched his own clothes over his heart and thought he had a very strange feeling. It was as if something very important had slipped from his memory. In the tower, Jace listened to the argument of sorcerers about black magic. Some believed that it should all be destroyed so that the second chaos did not appear, others defended the current. Suddenly, a frightened Snow ran up to James. Snow took James to the ruins of the golem and told him what happened behind the city walls with the demon. James was shocked, but at least snow froze everything she could muster. James knew that only Yggdrasil knew the spell to repair a part of his own soul, but there was no way to contact him. Eiffel asked if the destruction of the golem would destroy everything that was invested in it, and indeed it was. Everyone was scared because there could be really valuable memories inside. Little Eno began to cry and beg for the golem to be saved. Meanwhile, all the other golems gathered around their eviscerated brother and began discussing a plan of action. Suddenly, everyone heard the voices of the golems. They promised that they would save him because they had the memories of Yggdrasil hidden in them, and by joining forces they could do it. James respected the golems' decision, but couldn't help but ask if they were going to be okay after something like this. The golems just smiled and said it didn't matter, as they would do it for Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil saw fragments of memories with Rosa's obliterated face and could not make out who she was. He felt tears on his own cheeks, and he thought that he had stopped crying 1,000 years ago. Actually, Yggdrasil had no idea where he was. He was in the middle of complete darkness. It seemed to him that he was moving somewhere, and most likely the problem was in his head. Everything got mixed up. Yggdrasil thought intently. If this memory was so important, he had to have a backup plan in case something happened to the golem. Suddenly, a glowing passage opened up behind him. Yggdrasil angrily said that there was no point in the door if he couldn't get out. A second passage appeared, a third, and soon the entire space up to the very sky was filled with doors. While Yggdrasil was asking whoever was doing this to finally show himself, all the golems and jinn came pouring out through one of the passages. They came for him. They came to save their owner. Rosa looked in horror at the once fertile lands of Asta. Now it was clear why it was sold for nothing. Cracked dry land, collapsed houses, complete desolation. The lady and earl of these lands fled long ago to be away from the epidemic. In addition to the fact that it had not rained for a long time, the ground had recently begun to freeze, and the epidemic worsened due to poor nutrition. A man was coughing on the ground, and San picked him up, giving him a drink of clean water. The man couldn't believe his eyes that a real elf had been forgotten here. Sun explained that he was helping Lady White. Brad noted that they didn't have the space to treat and segregate patients by severity. San, meanwhile, asked where the pastor was, and the man replied that he was doing a lot for the townspeople. The man said that the pastor sold them holy water for healing and showed them a bottle. Rosa's face twisted with anger so that the pastor would sell healing. 10 gold for a bottle, but the water didn't help. The pastor explained this by the fact that these people did not pray enough, because with a righteous faith, holy water should definitely help. Enraged, Rose asked what the papacy would do when it found out. Brad promised that the priests who took everything would be recovered, and then they would be kicked out. Rosa had a plan. She sent Brad and Arthur to church, and she was going to do something separate, something very important. Rosa's eyes sparkled just thinking about it. The priests were not at all happy to see Brad, and rudely asked what he had forgotten here. However, Arthur's menacing appearance made them cool down a little and pretend to be polite. However, despite Brad's assurances that he had come to help, the priests looked at each other and asked if it was time for him to take a break from his post. Brad asked if he could ask for outside help, food and medicine, because Asta's church is rich enough, but the priests assured him that he was wrong. Also, they were not going to let the sick inside. Brad asked how he could help then, but the priest with an icy face asked, if he is no longer the archbishop, does he have the right to interfere in the affairs of the church? San, meanwhile, was in the main square shouting for everyone to come and pick up the free food. There was indeed a lot of food in the tent, and people were giving thanks with tears in their eyes. San also asked everyone to bring all the bottles with holy water. To the question, why? He answered that real holy water helps no matter what. It is not a matter of faith. Suddenly, a roar was heard in the sky, and the frightened people saw a dragon. The next moment it started to rain, and miraculously, everyone who was exposed to it no longer felt sick. Their symptoms disappeared. Sun explained that this is true holy water that does not choose. Rose on Gold's back was happily splashing water from the reservoir in white, which she had brought on her friend's back. Brad was rudely pushed out of the temple and ordered not to come again because they have so much work to do. However, the priest was somewhat surprised when he did not see the crowd that usually stood at the temple. Gold's loud voice cut through the sky. She asked if the priest had not enough of the ceiling of the temple, which had collapsed, for him to finally understand everything. Rosa landed and asked Brad and Arthur for a little help. The priest bowed at Rosa's feet and begged for forgiveness. Rosa declared that she was the new lady of these lands, and Brad was her assistant and advisor. If the archbishop left his post, he did not deserve contempt. The priest excused himself that they had a lot of problems. Rosa asked if that was the problem and threw all the bottles of fake holy water in his face. Rose imitated the priest's voice. I am God's servant. I should take 100 gold from you for a bottle, but I will take only 10. Did the priest sleep normally after such a complete deception? The priest tried to say that she couldn't prove that he was the one collecting the money, but Rosa threatened that she would find a book with prices for holy water, and the priest got scared. The priest said that only prayers were supposed to help. A furious Rose asked if he took responsibility for his own words, and Arthur pushed the priest to the floor. Rosa ordered to cut off the priest's brush and see if he prayed enough, giving him holy water as a cure. The other Templars were horrified, but did not interfere. Brad told the priest it wasn't too late. He had to accept humility and start helping people in the name of God, start everything from the very beginning, because there are many paths in life. Rosa said that it was time to collect the money, but Gold gently suggested that they should deal with everything on their own. In addition, the dragoness had something else to say to these saints. When Rosa left, Gold turned to the priest and was furious. She bought this land for crazy money. He definitely had no forgiveness for his own actions. He will get everything for the Lord of the Lands. Gold stated that the priest would make this land worth the price paid for it, work to the death to restore everything to the way it was before. Rosa addressed the townspeople on the main square of the city. She, Rosa White, the current Lady of Asta, will do everything to restore the population until everything returns to its original state. In addition to the necessary works to restore homes, the people of Asta had to believe that everything would work out for them. Previously, White was unfit for life, but thanks to human work, everything has changed. Someone in the crowd shouted why he should believe Rosa. It was no different from the previous caring aristocracy, and people will no longer believe in these fairy tales. Rosa replied that these people did not receive state protection, worked until exhaustion, and most of their money went to paying taxes, but she knew how to fix everything. Rosa is a lady, but she had no idea how to build houses or roads here. She didn't know Asta as well as these people. If they do not have an idea of what they need, then any ruler is powerless. People were moved by Rosa's words, and she continued to say that together they could do anything and get better than before. If they are not ready for tomorrow, they are not ready for the future. Rosa shouted that no one would force anyone, because she did not need people who would be afraid to go forward. She asked who was with her, and the crowd roared in support of Lady White. After the speech, Rosa sat tiredly on the stairs. It took all her strength out of her. She did not even imagine that it would be so difficult with Asta's people. She thought that only holy water would be enough. Sun carefully said that Rosa gathered the world's most diverse population and clearly divided responsibilities, so everything worked like a single mechanism. Rose is truly an incredible ruler. Suddenly, Rosa remembered all the words that Yggdrasil had told her about Sun and jumped up angrily. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became, although San didn't understand why. Suddenly, a heavy downpour began, and Sun immediately covered Rosa with his cloak so that she would not get wet. Such a small detail made Rosa smile, and they became a little closer to each other. Meanwhile, the golems surrounding Yggdrasil were worried that they were too small, especially Jin, who was used to being a tower. But it was all the influence of the spirit world. Yggdrasil asked to tell what had happened, and the golems brought him fragments of stone. Ig took it in his hand and tried to stop the decay, but the memories kept coming out of the cracks. The teacher warned Yggdrasil that the most important moments and emotions will be in the created golem, so he had to protect his own children, because part of the memory will simply disappear. The missing part could be saved if other memories were involved, and that's why all the golems gathered around. They believed that their lives were unequivocally worth it. Yggdrasil poured magic into the stone fragment and it glowed, creating a ghostly copy of him, Yggdrasil, next to him. The journey in search of memories has begun. Under the motto that the future of the city is in their hands, the residents of Asta took it for work. Knocker did his best to help, while Sun and Arthur divided the responsibilities between the townspeople. Rosa and Gold looked at how the work was going and couldn't be happy because they called Knocker. Some priest brought Gold a list of all the supplies in the temple and trembled. She then gave everyone a good scare. Rosa didn't know if it was luck or fate, but everything was very interesting. One cannot rely only on luck or pleasant coincidences. The inhabitants had to build the city by their own efforts. Rosa believed that she had chosen a very correct strategy because a house built by her own hands is not afraid of any destruction. It will always be rebuilt anew. A few days later, Gold brought the reports to Rosa and was surprised that she was working while lying on the couch. Rosa was bored because every day she had the same duties. Rosa wondered if there had been any news from Raymond or Yggdrasil. Gold replied that she had brought a letter from Raymond, but Rosie wasn't really interested. Raymond wrote every day, but Yggdrasil never wrote. Rosa asked Gold that if it was impossible to limit the use of magic, and if mages and priests did not like each other, wouldn't Yggdrasil be treated badly in Teki? Divine and magical power contradict each other, so magicians hide in the shrine, the temple of Tehi. If Raymond had gone alone, he might not have made it, so Yggdrasil was with him. Gold reassured Rosa, because Yggdrasil was always thinking of his lady. Would he be able to sit quietly, knowing that Rosa was worried? He will try to return as soon as possible. Rosa thought at first that it was because she had grown up and no longer needed to be followed around all the time, then angrily shouted that she was just being ignored. Gold placed a stack of papers in front of Rosa and told her to finish them as soon as possible, because they still needed to get to Legion, a village outside Tahai. When Rosa realized that Legion was not far from Tehi, she began to work as if obsessed. If she finishes quickly, she can meet Raymond and Yggdrasil. Rosa was glad to finally be in Legion, but the sight of the village was simply awful. Brad said that Legion used to be a hotbed of god beasts, but that was all gone. San also noted that it was completely empty and no holy power could be felt. This place needed a lot of work and care, but it was long ago stopped being looked after. The legions had been sending letters to the archbishop asking for help, so Brad knew there was some hidden problem here, but he didn't even know how bad it was. Even in the absence of the pope, the 7 cardinals started a struggle for power. Someone had to rule the legion, and to show their own greatness, they engaged in infighting. However, the appearance of Elizabeth should lift the mood and spirit of the inhabitants of Legion, because their destiny is to care for divine animals. The problem was only in the mascot. The guardian tree, the talisman that gods and beasts were supposed to use, was right in front of Rose, blackened and withered, completely dead and without a drop of divine energy. But Elizabeth immediately liked the tree. She jumped out of Rose's hands and jumped on the branches. However, very soon the branch under her cracked and San barely managed to catch her. The divine tree has weakened so much that even a divine beast is unable to climb it. Rosa noticed that the tree looked like a dead tree. Maybe the drought was to blame. A guy jumped out from under the trees and said that the tree would die if you gave it water. It was Pam. He was in charge of this divine tree. Rosa asked if it was Pam who had petitioned the papacy for help. When Pam realized that the archbishop was here, he almost threw himself at his feet with pleas for help. It turned out that the adults said that the tree could be saved if it was given holy water from the papacy, but these attempts did not lead to anything. Pam asked for help from the papacy and from the archbishop at the same time. Rosa sat down and touched the roots of the tree with her hand. She remembered Yggdrasil's words that the holy water of the papacy was all rotten, and therefore it was necessary to try with her water. Rose poured water from white onto the tree, and it instantly came to life before everyone's eyes. A luxurious crown, flexible branches, the shining majesty of the divine tree appeared before them. Pam was delighted, because even the bishops of the papacy could not do anything. He asked Rosa not to go anywhere and ran somewhere, promising to show something very interesting. San enthusiastically said that it was no wonder that the divine tree was associated with divine beasts, because now that the tree had recovered, it was radiating an abundance of divine energy. Elizabeth, who had been in her kitten form lately, also purred happily and assumed her normal form, absorbing the energy of the tree. Pam came back, gasping. He asked to look at this beast as well, and handed Rosa a snow-white kitten with wings, which was also a divine beast. Elizabeth began to happily lick the kitten, and Rosa said that since the divine tree was dying, she could not imagine that there were still divine beasts nearby. Pam replied that he had hidden it because the papacy had already taken away several beasts. They said that it was strange that holy water did not help, and that some experiments should be done. Horrified, Rosa asked where the adults were, to which Pam replied that his parents had died and the others had left the village. After the tree withered, they ceased to receive the support of the papacy. Pam asked the archbishop to watch over the divine beast while he went to an audience with the papacy. Let him be left alone, but it is his duty to take care of the animals. Rosa's face darkened, and she told Gold that they would have to visit the papacy, not because she wanted to see Yggdrasil, but because they had to deal with everything. In the Temple of Tehi, the Rose passed one by one the inspection posts. She was extremely annoyed by the situation. How much more did she have to walk to get to the temple? There were 7 posts. While Arthur calmed Rosa down, Brad asked what the measures were all about, since nothing like this had happened before. The guard replied that it was because of Lillian's disappearance and many new events. Suddenly, Rosa realized that 7 posts were created by 7 bishops. However, no one asked her opinion, and she is also a bishop as the owner of the White Lands. The guard replied that he was only following orders and could not do anything. Another guard refused to let Rosa into the temple, no matter how much she claimed that the bishop was too. The guard asked how she could prove it, because he couldn't trust every upstart with such claims. Rosa had to go to the nearest shrine to confirm her status. Brad asked if the guard was just as overbearing with Archbishop Raymond, then demanded to meet with the guard's leadership. The guard barely explained that she knew nothing about where Raymond was from. Rosa confusedly thought that peace and white would be enough. She thought that having just a state was easy. As long as she was in her illusions, people were subjected to experiments. They suffered. If white was as great as the Empire, would Rosa and her people be treated accordingly? Rose told Gold that she had changed her mind and would accept all the land the dragons had given her. Rosa learned this difficult lesson. You need to correctly evaluate yourself. Otherwise, other people will never recognize you in life. Yggdrasil found himself in a bright place, and then he saw little Rose there, who was running joyfully towards him. However, the girl ran through IG and rushed to his ghostly copy. In the past, Yggdrasil was angry that after his marriage to the gambler Minerva, the whites stopped counting altogether. He shouted in his heart that the count was a fool, and then he saw that Rosa heard it. Rosa gleefully repeated that the count was a jerk, and Yggdrasil tried very hard to stop her. He even officially apologized for his words and promised not to say such things again. Then Yggdrasil also saw Queen White, who tearfully asked his copy to take care of her daughter, Rose, and her husband in her absence. The king wept over the loss of Josephine, and Minerva said that she would soon marry, and it was not known what would happen to Rosa. Yggdrasil realized that she would be a child with a heart full of pain. Yggdrasil couldn't even remember the name of the dragoness who raised him, but he still felt the love she had for him, her care and affection for a human child. Even after returning the memories, the crystal will not be assembled into a single whole. If Yggdrasil wanted to go back, he had to replace and then renew the ghost crystal. Jin welcomed Yggdrasil back and asked if it had all been in vain. However, Yggdrasil had a clear plan, which he told the golem, and he himself had to collect all the fragments of memories. Yggdrasil ordered the golem to ask Knocker to make the golem's shell impenetrable so that not even a dragon could do anything to it, then promised to be sure to return. The guard invited Rosa to finally pass through the 7th gate. Rosa angrily asked if the patriarch would finally be there, to which the guard was embarrassed, because he was not very well informed. Rosa asked Gold to make it so that no one but them could enter inside, and the dragoness was happy to place a powerful dragon shield over the temple. As the guards looked on in confusion at this magic, Rosa angrily declared that she was the 7th bishop, and from now on no one would enter or leave the temple without her permission. At the noise, Bishop Stefan came out with others and sternly asked what was happening here. Brad immediately stepped forward and greeted the bishop. They were smiling very tightly. Bishops seem to be heralds of epidemics, poverty, and destruction, although in fact their true purpose is to extend a helping hand in the name of God. Because of their great respect, their influence is too high. Stefan started to ask if Brad was supposed to be busy with the restoration of the family, but Rosa interrupted him and said that she had come to meet the Pope and present him with her candidate. Stefan reported that by order of the Emperor, the acting bishop was removed from classified affairs. Rose opened her mouth, and the 3 of them and Brad began to pour poison on each other. However, Rosa was still allowed to sit at the bishop's table. Past bishops chose a candidate for the post of pope for no reason. Could this please the archbishop? Stefan answered that they did not have an official regulation, so the elections were held unilaterally. But even with Brad's recommendation, he didn't think Rose was a good candidate. One of the bishops remarked that the divine power that was felt from Rosa was simply incredible. Besides, how can they elect a new pope if Lillian's work has not been appreciated until now? Stephen declared that all 6 bishops could not accept a candidate for the role of pope. Rosa gasped and hid her face in her hands, pretending to cry from resentment. One of the bishops said that such a weak person could not be the pope, But Gold asked Rosa to stop, because this was exactly the reaction that everyone was waiting for, and therefore it was worth disappointing everyone. Rosa snorted and declared that all this is absurd. It's amazing how people don't understand each other. She came here as a bishop and never took the place of the Pope. First, Rosa wanted to make Raymond the head of the church, and therefore everything had to be reorganized to push him to this decision. These words surprised even Brad. The work of the bishops was reduced to the division of the territory, while the lands were destroyed and the people perished. Rosa thought for a long time, what can be done with such an irresponsible attitude? Rosa decided that secondly, she was going to recommend former Archbishop Brad for the position of Pope. None of those present had more knowledge about the god and the temple of Tehi. Stefan tried to protest, but one of the bishops said that this was the best option. There was no better candidate, and they were not yet ready to give up the position of Pope. The bishops with new strength began to gnaw among themselves, giving arguments for and against, and even just inventing some nonsense. Rosa looked at it with disgust on her face. Rosa angrily declared that all of them are just the spawn of evil and impure. Instead of informing the people about Lillian's crimes, the bishops set up roadblocks to save their own asses. Stefan tried to say that he was protecting the temple, but Rosa shouted that it was a lie, because such actions require an incredible amount of effort. She knows it better than anyone. Such irresponsible and greedy bishops had no right to even approach the temple of Tehi, so Rosa ordered everyone to get out of here immediately. However, of all the bishops, Rosa singled out Stefan, whom she asked to stay. Stefan was surprised, but Rosa had an important question for him. What happened to the divine beasts taken from Legion? Stefan called Legion a village of rogues. After the Pope's disappearance, he changed the financing because he saw an incredible flow of money going to Legion. After investigating, he found out where the money actually went. In addition, it turned out that the divine beasts stopped appearing in the village, and the trees withered without looking at the holy water. So Stefan decided that he had no choice but to take the god beasts from Legion to save them, because something was wrong with the village and its inhabitants. Rosa said she asked about the animals. Stefan stated that they didn't really have godlike powers, and Rosa shouted her question, "What did he do with them?" Stefan replied that he checked them the old way. Brad went pale. It was barbaric. The horn of the unicorn was cut off, and the wings of the Pegasus were cut off, but after the holy water they did not grow back, and therefore were not real. Rose was mad. She was desperately reprimanding Stefan because even she knew that the holy water from Tehi was rotten and did not work as it should. Rosa showed her water and declared that now she understood why God had given it to her. Dandelion could not give such powerful power to just anyone, especially those who were not competent in spiritual matters. Enraged, Rosa threw the bag of holy water right at Stefan, who fell from the force of the impact. His face began to blacken and smoke, and Rosa was afraid that she had overdone it. However, Brad explained to Rosa that demons had taken up residence in Stefan's soul and now they were coming out. Did everything Stefan did not happen out of his will? Rose and Gold went further into the dungeon to save the divine beasts. It was very dark all around, and the stench of blood was everywhere, horrifying Lady White. Suddenly, someone spoke to them in the darkness. It was a snow-white unicorn, but in place of its horn was only a stump covered with blackened blood. Rosa was glad that they had finally found someone. However, the unicorn looked down at Rose and Gold and declared that his saviors could be someone better than a lizard and a bean. The girls froze in place at such words. An angry Rose approached the unicorn to find out who he had called a bean. However, the proud unicorn declared that of course they had come to save such a precious creature. The girls saw chains and handcuffs holding the unicorn in place. He kept telling the bean to release him, but the dirty lizard didn't even come close. Gold was instantly enraged and almost killed the unicorn on the spot. Rosa barely restrained her friend by saying that he was just injured, because the whole floor was covered in blood. However, Gold explained that someone else's blood was on the floor because it makes the unicorns weak. Most likely, the bishop specially poured it here to restrain the unicorn. Gold coldly offered to kill the unicorn and go save other animals. These words finally scared the unicorn and he began to beg not to go, but to help him. After Gold said respectfully asking for help, the unicorn finally bowed its head and very politely apologized for its behavior. Rosa thought that he was still a child. The unicorn asked, "Where is his horn?" Rosa thought about it and decided that it could be near the fountain with holy water, because that's where Stephanie left the Pegasus's severed wings. Horrified, the unicorn said that his horn could just rot there and rushed to the fountain on his own. Gold picked Rosa up in her arms and said they were running after him. When the girls found themselves in the hall with the fountain, Rosa almost felt sick. The smell of rotten holy water was even worse than the smell of blood. Her divine power was against what she felt. Brad, who caught up with the girls with sand, found an already blackened and rotten horn, with a look of sympathy on his face. The unicorn cried that now he would never be able to return to heaven. Rosa said that not everything is over yet. It was only a guess, but she determinedly took out her holy water and poured it on the rotten horn. The real holy water did indeed work, and the horn shone again in its snow-white color. Rosa put the horn to the place where it was cut off, and the unicorn became itself, regained its strength. While the unicorn happily ran around Rosa and thanked her endlessly. Brad couldn't believe that the holy water had been neglected so much that it had turned black. Brad spoke sadly that he couldn't believe things were so bad in the papacy. Will Tehi ever be able to work like before in this god-forsaken land? Rosa decided to change the subject and asked if Brad had found the Pegasus wings. He found it, but they also rotted and barely held on to the beautiful snow-white beast. However, Rosa already knew how to deal with it. She took out her pouch of holy water and healed the Pegasus and his wings. Real holy water could really fix everything. When Tehi finds a worthy, valid pope, it will only be a matter of time before he returns to his former greatness. Rosa is sure of that. Brad looked at the girl gratefully. Brad realized that it was better late than never and headed towards the fountain with determination. He began to heal the holy water with his divine energy, slowly, but the result appeared immediately. Surrounded by a divine glow, Brad promised Rosa that he would take everything into his own hands and bring the papacy back to its senses, fulfill God's will, and correct all Lillian's mistakes. However, Brad had one condition. In order to become pope, he wanted to get permission to live in white in retirement. Of course, Rosa happily agreed to accept him when the time came. Knocker, meanwhile, in his forge, reassembled and strengthened the golem as Yggdrasil had requested, so that no one, not even the dragon, could harm it. The golem happily jumped off the table and ran through the streets of White to the castle. However, no matter how much he looked and there was no one inside, everyone seemed to have forgotten about him. However, the fox found the golem. The friends began to play happily with each other, and Margaret thought that it was a great relief that Yggdrasil and Rose would return safe and sound. Yggdrasil walked desolately through the fragments of his own memories. There were so many of them that there was no end in sight. Living forever turned out to be even more painful. Behind the next passage, he saw his little self. A woman came up and asked if he was human, because he seemed like a baby bird to her. She became interested in a child who could not hide magic. When the woman asked where the boy's parents were, he replied that they abandoned him with the words that he was a real monster. Instead of answering, the stranger held out her hand to the boy. Dragons had a rule: protect children. It doesn't matter if it's a bird or a human child. If Yggdrasil didn't want to be alone anymore, he could go and live with this woman. Rosa had promised to stay in Tehi and help the temple regain its position, but she had no idea that it would take so long. Brad was very grateful for that. However, Brad said that it was time for Rosie to go home. Raymond was due back soon, and the other bishops were hard at work again, so he could manage without her help in the future. Rosa didn't mind. If the epidemic was over, the bishops were working, and the divine animals were back in Legion, then she really had no reason to stay in Techi anymore. While they were saying goodbye, Raymond just returned. He was very surprised to see Rosa at Tehi and apologized for not coming back sooner because he didn't know Rosa was here. Rosa was also glad to see Raymond, but she really wanted someone else. She peeked behind Raymond and asked if Yggdrasil had been with him all this time. Raymond replied, surprised that Yggdrasil had not come with him. Rose fainted because Raymond did not know where he had gone. He only said something about the demon kingdom and disappeared. Raymond noticed that Rose was upset and asked her to calm down, because Yggdrasil would never leave her in his life. It is quite possible that he was already waiting for her in White. Returning to White, Rose ran around the castle shouting, "Yggdrasil!" but he was nowhere to be found. The whole situation began to stress her even more, because he seemed to have fallen through the ground. Rose asked Margaret if she'd seen Yggdrasil. Margaret assumed that he might have some important business, and asked not to worry about the invincible archmage. Rosa once promised herself that she would not wait any longer, but she did it again. She knew from childhood that promises to return do not always hold back. Times were financially difficult, So Rosa's aunt, Minerva, was married off. Rosa knew that she would never go back to White, even if her marriage turned out to be difficult and painful. Rosa also knew that her family and even White's people would eventually leave to find their own way. They will not stay on her side because she is tied to this place by her fate. Rosa wiped away her tears and firmly stated that if waiting for the fulfillment of empty promises means believing in someone, then she no longer wants to believe in anyone. When Rosa was heading down the corridor, she saw her favorite golem. The girl greeted him and smiled, held out her hands, but the golem hid in fear. Rosa didn't know that the golem simply didn't recognize her, because he lost his memory, and decided that even her little friend wasn't happy to see her anymore. No one was really happy for her. The golem sensed Rosa's distress, heard her tears, and gently pulled her cloak. He clung to the sad girl and she gently hugged him, pressing to her heart. Rosa looked through the financial statements and noticed that the numbers did not add up. The treasurer could have seen her 4 times already, but no one even tried, so he did nothing. The treasurer apologized and promised to rework, but Rosa said that it was too late to rework. However, if this happens again, she will cut his salary as many times as he makes a mistake. The upset treasurer left Rosa's office where Gold was just about to enter. She noted that working is good, but if Rosa gets sick, it will affect work. Rosa agreed and asked Gold to wake her up in the 10 minutes she would be asleep on the table. Gold was confused. She meant a full sleep, but Rosa said that she would have enough. Gold quietly left the room. Snow, who was carrying Rosie's freshly baked bread, asked if she could come in. Gold just shook her head because Rosa decided to rest. Gold was very worried about Rosa. She completely immersed herself in work and refused to rest. No one could sleep peacefully because there had been no news from Yggdrasil for 3 months. Rosa came out of her bedroom late at night. She could not sleep properly again. Lady White made her way to Jin, and the golem was very happy to have her visit him again. Jean lit the fireplace, and Rosa lay down on a pillow right on the carpet. She was more at ease in the magic tower because Jean also knew very well what it was like to wait too long for Yggdrasil. Jin stated that he had a lot of memories of Yggdrasil, so it was fine. Rose envied the golem because she did not know so much about the archmage, what kind of person he was, how he lived. Rose heard the golem's words about the memories and suddenly asked if Jean wouldn't mind telling her about Yggdrasil's childhood, since it was his piece of memories. The golem agreed. A long time ago, before the White Kingdom existed, and before Yggdrasil was called Yggdrasil, a dragoness led a boy to an old house. Apart from them, no one else lived on this mountain. The boy asked incredulously, "Why does a dragoness live in such a small house built for humans? Is the lady really a dragon?" The woman just laughed in response. The woman bent down and asked to look into her eyes. Vertical pupils definitely could not belong to a person. Living as a human was her hobby, and how would she recognize the boy's magic if she were human? In the eyes of other people, they were both monsters. So why not start trusting each other, become a family? The boy thought for a while and clung to the woman's dress as a sign of agreement. In the house, the boy was immediately allowed to read any books and eat anything. The dragoness proudly declared that she copes well with both magic and housework. That's why it's so tidy here. Next, she asked the boy's name, but he just lowered his eyes to the floor and awkwardly replied that he had no name. The dragoness decided in an instant that if he was now her son, she would give him a name. The dragoness's gaze wandered over the bookshelves until she came across a book about the world tree. In her opinion, the more pathetic the better, so she named the boy Yggdrasil. A few years later, the dragoness was horrified to learn that the other children teased Yggdrasil and laughed at him because he was not a real dragon. She was angry and was going to talk to her parents. However, in the end, she pointed her finger at Yggdrasil and asked him not to forget why she taught him. Yggdrasil was her child, a dragon child like all the others, even stronger than them. Once Yggdrasil returned from the city, and the dragoness was just washing blankets, dancing on them in a tub of water. She asked him to join, and Yggdrasil grumbled that the dragoness changed the covers like a human. The dragoness replied that sooner or later Yggdrasil would have to do it on his own, so she had to teach him. Yggdrasil wondered if she would ever stop helping. The dragoness answered seriously that the day when Yggdrasil would learn magic, eat, wash, and do everything else would surely come. Yggdrasil pouted, and the dragoness laughed at him. In magic control classes, Yggdrasil hit the target with his shots right in the center, and the dragoness was glad that she had taught him well. Yggdrasil denied that he had taught himself, for which he received criticism of his manners. The dragoness looked dreamily at Yggdrasil and said that maybe she had raised him too well, but now she was sure he would be fine wherever he went. The dragoness asked if Yggdrasil would like to try living among humans. She taught him magic, raised him strong, and also taught him all the household things that were possible. Yggdrasil bitterly replied that it sounded like the dragoness was raising him for the day she would leave him. The dragoness tried to calm him down until suddenly there was a knock at the door. A voice on the other side pleaded for help, and the dragoness realized that something terrible had happened. It turned out that the dragoness Rednia gave birth to a jewelry dragon. Chained in chains in the middle of a dark dungeon, Rednia screamed desperately that she would never forgive. She vowed to make everyone suffer and pay for her agony. The dragoness of Yggdrasil was discussing a recent event with her friend. She knew that Rednia was pregnant, but she didn't see any warning signs or symptoms of distress. The jewel dragon is a mutant dragon that devours gems. He had powerful abilities that allowed him to transform into an adult dragon in just a day, depending on his food. Yggdrasil had heard that this species of dragon had been exiled since ancient times, as other dragons were openly afraid of their powerful abilities. The friend said that the baby dragon was taken from the moment of birth, and Rednia is in custody. The dragoness grimaced, even if it was a threat, but an innocent newborn child. Yggdrasil thought that it took incredible moral strength and determination for his teacher to raise someone like him in a closed society. Was he a burden just by being around? When Yggdrasil came home the next day, the dragoness was hastily packing. It turned out that Rednia's child died because she was not with her, and because of this, Rednia went crazy and started hunting all the children. Yggdrasil objected that they should fight together, but the dragoness would not hear anything. Rednia was an ancient dragon and could defeat her in a matter of minutes. There was no chance of victory. While they were talking, a terrible noise was heard, and the next moment the roof of the house was blown off. Enraged, Rednia demanded from the teacher, the golden dragoness of antiquity, to give her Yggdrasil. The teacher yelled that she thought what happened to Rednia and her child was unfair, but Yggdrasil wasn't involved in any way like all the other dragons. Rednia denied that it was unimportant. They all just stood there and watched, and so every living dragon had to pay for Rednia's child's death with the lives of their own children. The teacher threw herself onto the dragoness and covered Yggdrasil with her. She ordered him to run away and hide among the people, because not even Rednia can kill all the people in the world. Yggdrasil, with tears in his eyes, asked what would happen to the teacher then, but she answered that now he will live a good independent life without problems, that people are much more interesting than he thinks. The dragoness smiled and added that Yggdrasil's training was complete. From now on, he could go and live in the world he belonged to, away from the stupid dragons. The dragons began a battle not for life, but for death, and Yggdrasil rushed through the forest with all his might. The teacher's words rang in his ears like a giant bell. Both dragonesses were in deep wounds. Yggdrasil's teacher asked if Rednia realized that she was just driving herself to death, but for Rednia, her life ended the moment her child died. Rednia opened her mouth to end it all with one magical strike. While the teacher was wondering if Yggdrasil had managed to escape, he returned to the clearing and called out Rednia's name at the top of his lungs. Yggdrasil approached the teacher and said that he was not sure that people were more interesting than he thought, if he could live happily ever after. But he is sure that he is a dragon's child. Yggdrasil shouted to Rednia that she should deal with him, not his teacher, and he would deal with her. Rednia opened her mouth again for the fatal blow. Yggdrasil defeated Rednia, but was badly wounded. The teacher said that she only wanted him to live a human life, be happy among other people, and die a human being. But looking at the barely alive Yggdrasil, she realized that she was still just a stupid, sentimental dragoness. The teacher handed Yggdrasil the heart of Rednia and offered to live forever. Sometime later, Yggdrasil began to be called the guardian angel of cubs. He did not like this title, and the teacher was happy that her student received such recognition. The teacher stressed that he would be called that while he lived with the dragons. She really wanted Yggdrasil to live among humans and enjoy a colorful life. On the bridge, Yggdrasil met a young man who happily asked if he was the same forest mage who was rumored to have defeated the dragon. The boy's name was Lucas White, and he offered to be friends. Yggdrasil clenched his fists and said that he does not speak to those who are weaker than him, so they had to fight with their fists. He promised to listen to Lucas if he won. However, if Yggdrasil wins, Lucas should go with him to the teacher and tell her that he is Yggdrasil's friend. With these words, Yggdrasil rushed at the dazed Lucas. A short time later, Yggdrasil brought the battered Lucas to a hut on the mountain, and he did indeed tell the teacher that he was Yggdrasil's friend. The teacher was happy because Yggdrasil brought home a friend for the first time. Sometime later, Lucas told Yggdrasil that one day he would be king. In this regard, the boy really wanted Yggdrasil to join him and become his personal mage. With sad thoughts that if he left the dragoness, she would be left all alone, Yggdrasil entered the house and became numb, because it was empty inside. Yggdrasil found a note, where it was written in Rednia's handwriting, that if he ever came to the addressee after the teacher had left, then he had to promise to help in anything. While Yggdrasil was feverishly thinking about what the words about "when I leave" meant, the teacher just returned. She was expecting him a little later and was confused. Yggdrasil asked desperately where she was going to leave him for someone else. Would the teacher have left without saying anything if he hadn't found that note? Why? The teacher smiled sadly and said that eternal sleep awaits her. Stunned, Yggdrasil questioned whether she really intended to leave him and die. However, the teacher's eternal sleep was planned long before her meeting with Yggdrasil. She had already lived too long, and when she met him, she decided that raising a boy would be her last thing. Fortunately, Yggdrasil grew up to be a wonderful young man, and she tried her best to send him back to the human world, but things don't always go as planned with children. It gave the teacher so much joy to watch Yggdrasil grow and share these moments with him that she kept missing the right moment to leave forever. But now Yggdrasil even had a friend. He was no longer alone. It's time for him to live his life and for the teacher to finally finish hers. Yggdrasil, with tears in his eyes, asked if the teacher was unhappy because of him, but she hugged him and said that now she was finally free from all worries and burdens. It was time for the last lesson. Yggdrasil had to learn to say goodbye. He hugged his teacher up to his white fingers and sobbed loudly like a small child. Rosa felt very sorry for Yggdrasil. How many times did he have to say goodbye that it became his personal fear? What a lonely life if it is associated with endless goodbyes. Rose really didn't want Yggdrasil to leave her, and she didn't want him to be alone even more. He taught her that she was not alone, tried to fulfill all her wishes. If Yggdrasil gets his happiness after leaving Rosa, will she be able to say goodbye to him with a smile on her face? She could never imagine her world without him. Rose clenched her fists and wept bitterly. She didn't know what to do now, and she needed Yggdrasil's advice more than ever in her life. In the Imperial Palace, one of the advisors was indignant that in just 3 years, the Whites had captured more than a third of the Empire's land, and that's even without military action. The Empire could no longer collect taxes from the lands that belonged to the Whites. Tax collection decreased, which in turn led to financial problems. The ministers asked Adrian to do something. Adrian lazily listened to the proposal to declare war on White and suggested that the ministers deliver the letter themselves. Do they know that White was guarded by dragons? However, Hadrian believed that it was not dragons to be feared in White, but a mage who had suffered humiliation in the past with the first king of White, the great mage Yggdrasil. One of the ministers stated that he would also not like a military solution to the issue, and therefore invented a way that would satisfy everyone. The minister proposed marriage to Rosa White. Adrian was struck by lightning. He began to shout at the minister that he had lost his mind. The minister excused himself for sending only one letter with this proposal. Hadrian was frankly scared of how Yggdrasil might react to such a proposal, but at the same time he couldn't help agreeing that geopolitically such a marriage would be great. At White Sun, he was looking over a letter from the Empire when Gold entered. She looked at the pile of precious gifts that lined the room and snorted because Rosa was sending everything back. It turned out that Rosie was sent gifts and offers from many different owners. However, Sun showed Gold the letter from Adrian himself and suggested that he would have to read it after all. Gold agreed to deliver the letter and headed to Rosa's office. In 3 years, Rosa turned into an incredibly gentle but mature girl and now had a truly royal appearance. Gold clucked her tongue in displeasure as Rosa refused to rest again. It could reflect badly on her body and health. However, Rosa assured that everything was fine. Gold just sighed and handed Rosa the letter that was lying among the other letters with marriage proposals. It was absolutely impossible to ignore a letter from the Empire itself. Rosa took the letter and smiled sadly. She wondered involuntarily if she had accepted Hadrian's offer. Would Yggdrasil have appeared then? Meanwhile, Yggdrasil, wrapped in his dark cloak and hood, arrived at Tissa. Through the bustle of street vendors, he confidently made his way to the palace. In the palace, Lady Lang was looking at her own jewels and thinking that they always made her feel better, until suddenly a maid knocked at the door saying that someone had come to see her. However, as soon as Lang heard that it was Yggdrasil, she immediately ordered him to be let in. Yggdrasil greeted Lady Lang, or as he was accustomed, Lady Anastasia. Lang smiled and was glad that the last child, Grace, managed to find her after all. However, if Yggdrasil wasn't going to spoil her mood, he should have kept calling Lady Lang. Yggdrasil thought wistfully that he had finally learned his teacher's name. He had heard that Lang chose immortality and also loved to party, so he sought her out in Tissa, a place where the parties never stopped. It was Lady Lang Grace who had sent the note then, and now the dragoness could not ignore her friend's last request, especially since Yggdrasil looked very confused. Yggdrasil promised not to distract Lang from her work, and revealed that he needed help with an ancient golem recipe that Grace had taught him. There was a problem with the golem's memory. Sun looked at Rosa with loving eyes and assumed that the tea was not helping. Rosa had been drinking the sleeping tea for several weeks now, but it didn't look like she was sleeping well. Rosa only smiled and assured that she was sleeping little by little. Everything was fine. San cleared his throat and very carefully asked if she was going to accept Emperor Hadrian's offer. Rosa replied that she didn't at the moment, but if it worked for White, she would marry anyone and nothing would stop her. She asked if Sun believed that Yggdrasil would show up at her wedding. Rose took a deep breath and said that she had learned something in 3 years without Yggdrasil. She no longer needed him to be by her side. If only Rosie could find a way to find out that Yggdrasil was alive and well. San asked if she remembered the contract with him. Of course, Rose remembered the oath of loyalty that all lords took. However, Sun was referring to the contract between the two of them, that the divine power was killing little Rose, and so Yggdrasil exchanged the divine power for his own magical power, binding their lives into one. So the fact that Rose was alive and well was the best confirmation that Yggdrasil was okay, at least for now. Rosa was surprised by the indent about "for now." San said that he had already sent his elves to all corners of the continent in search of Yggdrasil. Meanwhile, he only asked her to take her time and not get married in a hurry, because Yggdrasil had asked him to do so. Lady Lang reprimanded Yggdrasil for his appearance. She had worked so hard to make her way into the upper world, and here he was falling like snow on her head and could jeopardize her entire status. However, she still got to the point. There was nothing special about the spell itself. The problem was that Yggdrasil was trying to preserve all of his memories instead of destroying some. Yggdrasil remembered Rose and sadly stated that he did not want to forget anything. From these words, Lang understood why her friend Grace was so worried about this child. Life is eternal, but the heart is human. Yggdrasil explained that keeping memories and seeing them are two different things. He felt as if he was intruding on someone else's memories, and felt emotions that were not his own, and so he wanted to remember everything himself. Lang noted that there must have been a good reason for this. Right now, she didn't have an answer, but she promised to come up with something, and for now, Yggdrasil could live with her and not worry. To provide cover for Yggdrasil, Lang was going to present him as one of her knights, so the young lady will not have any questions about the magician who will live in her house just like that. Sana's assistant rushed towards him, shouting through the entire White Palace. His elves found Yggdrasil in Tissa with the Viscount's daughter, a lady named Lang. San could not believe what he heard. The aide insisted that Sun should tell Rosa everything, but Sun couldn't bring himself to say that Yggdrasil had been found for 3 years and asked for another lady's hand in marriage. However, Rosa, who was at the door at that moment, heard everything anyway. She came out to the elves with a dazed face, pale as death. Gold and San were up front about going after Yggdrasil and pulling him by the ears if necessary, but Rosa decided she would go on her own while they looked after White in the meantime. As protection, Rosa was going to take Arthur with her. He was quite suitable for this. You could also write a letter to Minerva and let her know that she would drop by for a visit. It was a good excuse. Rose swallowed the heavy lump in her throat and told everyone she was just going to make sure Yggdrasil was okay and would be right back home to White, nothing to worry about. Minerva sent Rosa an invitation to her son's birthday and debut. The holiday was supposed to take place already this week, and it was a really good opportunity to look into Tissa. Sun wished Rosa a safe journey and handed her a return scroll that contained a spell that would teleport Rosa to White at any moment. Rosa thanked sincerely and stepped into the teleporter with Arthur. Sun wasn't sure that letting Rosa go like this, alone, was a good decision. Gold noted with a smile that Rosa wasn't one to give up without all the answers. They were to support Rosa in every decision she made, as Yggdrasil did. Sun said sadly that he was not Yggdrasil, as he would never have made Rose wait and cry if he were him. Already at Tisa, Rosa realized that she had not replied to Minerva's letter, and now it was not a fact that she would be accepted. Arthur informed them that the guild would provide them with accommodation, and Rosa was to go there, and he would deliver the letter to the palace. In the late evening, when colorful fireworks lit up the sky of Tisa, Rose went out onto the balcony and looked up at the sky with hope, thinking that she and Yggdrasil were now so close. Rosa could not calm down. She kept thinking about what to say to Yggdrasil and what expression he would have on his face, so she decided to take a walk through the streets of the city to clear her head. Rosa was just thinking about Yggdrasil's last gift being fireworks when she suddenly saw him in the crowd. Their eyes met, but Lang called out to Yggdrasil and he simply turned around. Yggdrasil and Langa walked on, and Rose froze in the middle of the street. She was absolutely certain that Yggdrasil had seen her face, noticed her, so why did he just leave? Langa whined that Yggdrasil couldn't accompany her in that black robe. He had to look like one of her knights. However, Yggdrasil did not listen to her, confusedly looking at where Rose was. Yggdrasil thought he saw someone he knew. Lady Lang asked if it was a person from the memories, and Yggdrasil confirmed it, only she was a bit older. When Arthur found out that Rosa was walking around the city by herself in the evening, he almost went crazy with worry. But could something happen suddenly? Rosa only answered that she had seen Yggdrasil. If IG looked at Rosa with sadness, she would have put an end to everything. If he looked with disgust, she would be able to accept it. But here it is, as if he did not recognize it. Did Rose mean so little to him? With tears in her eyes, Rosa declared that she could not leave everything like this. She had to meet Yggdrasil in person and hear all the answers from him himself. Rosa warmly greeted Aunt Minerva, and she happily hugged Rosa, whom she had not seen for so long. Minerva was surprised that there were only two of them, but Arthur could be counted on. Minerva said with emotion that Rose had grown up to be a charming lady, and her father would have been proud of her. Rosa announced that she was only going to attend the banquet. Minerva felt bad, but she was more worried that Rosa might be recognized. Rose winked. She prepared something for disguise. Minerva suddenly asked if Yggdrasil was with her, because his name was also on the guest list. Rosa asked him not to mention that she was here. Minerva was surprised and asked if they did not quarrel, but Rosa only promised to tell everything later. Minerva was already busy. Rosa sent Arthur to rest, and she fell heavily on the bed in her room. She hadn't expected Yggdrasil to be at the banquet either. Will he come with that lady? Rosa thought that if she caught up with Yggdrasil, she might get the answers to her questions, but she got scared and froze in place. If all this time Yggdrasil had been preparing to break free from the oath he had made to Rosa's ancestors and sever his ties to White, then Rosa had no right to keep him. At the banquet, Rosa looked simply charming. She changed her hair color even though she never thought she would ever have to use the spell again. However, Minerva instantly recognized Rosa and even asked what was wrong with her hair. Rosa hissed at her aunt and asked to call her Lizzie because that was her disguise. Minerva was delighted with her niece's ingenuity. A little later, Rosa asked Minerva if Yggdrasil had arrived yet, and Minerva pointed to the other end of the hall. There stood Yggdrasil next to Lady Lang in fine attire. Rosa looked at the couple puzzled and asked if this lady was Lang. No matter which way you looked, she looked like she was the same age as Rosa herself 3 years ago. Rose looked at Lady Lang and thought that she was indeed as graceful and elegant as you would expect to see the beauty of Tissa. Lang caught her eye and Rosa hid behind the fan. Langa laughed. Thanks to Yggdrasil, her stay at the ball became very interesting. Yggdrasil remarked that if she was grateful, he would most likely find a way to help. Yggdrasil wasn't sure if he could treat Rose the same way he had before, because his emotions were so messed up. He had to stay away for the sake of the contract, but it was incredibly difficult. Minerva, who was watching Rose, said that she had to make up with Yggdrasil, and Rose growled that they didn't fight as far as they could tell. Yggdrasil had said before that he didn't like banquets, but now Rosa saw that he was lying. She couldn't even come up to talk because Langa was always there. Rosa angrily took the glass from the waiter and decided that she was now old enough to drink. And it doesn't matter what she drinks alone. Rosa boldly turned the glass over to herself. Lady Lang asked for a drink, and Yggdrasil headed for the tables. While he was thinking about what to choose, he saw Rosa surrounded by several men with missing faces. The men offered to spend time with them, but Rosa replied that she wanted to drink alone. One of them offered her a glass of something much tastier than her drink. Yggdrasil immediately intervened and took the goblet. He said that this wine was too strong for the young lady, unless someone wanted to take advantage of her fainting. Rosa angrily told him not to interfere in his own affairs because they are strangers. Yggdrasil denied that he could help a lady in distress even without a close acquaintance. Yggdrasil invited Rosie to go with him, and she agreed, as it was a chance to finally talk to him alone. They went out onto the balcony, away from the noise of the banquet. Yggdrasil introduced himself and asked Rosa's name. He apologized for his rudeness and offered the lady a breath of air to sober up, then bowed and was about to leave. Rosa could not let him go just like that, so she desperately shouted that she wanted to ask one question. She asked Yggdrasil if he was happy with what she stunned him with. Yggdrasil remarked that this was a strange question from a man he had seen for the first time. However, something about Rosa seemed familiar to him, so he assumed that they had already seen each other, although Rosa denied it. Music was heard. Dream of a Butterfly, the first composition of the night. Yggdrasil smiled and asked Rose to dance the first dance of the evening with him, then he would answer the question. A dance full of passion and intimacy began. Yggdrasil couldn't help but notice that Rose danced well, to which she replied that it was only because he led well. Yggdrasil said he had been through a lot in this life, but it wasn't all bad. And now he almost had what he wanted, so he was happy, he thought. Yggdrasil lifted Rose into the air and called her his mistress. Rosa was surprised that he recognized her, although the magician did not succeed immediately. And Yggdrasil remembered this magic. He touched Rosa's hair, causing it to begin to lose its magical color and return to its natural snow-white color. Yggdrasil said that Rose had grown. He did not think that she would come to meet him. Rosa shouted that she could not do otherwise because it was him. Yggdrasil was shocked that Rose had been waiting for him for years. He did not know that so much time had passed. However, Rosa said that she was happy for his happiness with Lady Lang, if only he had given a warning before disappearing. Rosa said that she has a present. She kissed Yggdrasil tenderly and said she would grant him his freedom. Under magical music, Rosa said goodbye to the magician she loved. Rosa rushed away, no matter how hard Yggdrasil tried to stop her. Crying, she ran to Arthur and said that they should go home immediately. There was nothing else to do here. Yggdrasil ran after Rosa, shouting her name, but saw only Rosa clinging to Arthur in the light of the teleport, and Arthur himself looking at him with utter contempt. Lady Lang was angry with Yggdrasil. How could he leave her alone when the first dance began? However, when she saw his face, she was not jokingly scared. Yggdrasil pulled back his favorite cloak with determination. Lang was surprised that he had just arrived and was already leaving, but Yggdrasil couldn't stay when he found out that he had disappeared into his memories for 3 years. Yggdrasil looked back at the time he spent with Rose, the contractor to whom he swore eternal loyalty, and realized that she always looked at him, while he himself turned away from her feelings. He was confused, not understanding what these complicated emotions were and whether they were his. However, maybe it was for the best. Whether Rosa understood him or not, it made it easier to break the contract. Yggdrasil said goodbye to Lange, and she asked in surprise why he made it sound like they would never meet again. Yggdrasil smiled, and Lange realized with horror that he wanted to leave forever. Lange bit her lip. Yggdrasil was all that was left of Grace, and now he was following her as well. She sighed because they were both incredibly selfish. At White Sun, he said sadly that he knew he shouldn't have let Rosa go alone. Considering the fact that she returned and plunged headlong into work without rest, everything was bad. Gold noted that Sun wouldn't have been able to do anything anyway. Rosa went to Tissa for answers, and the fact that she came back meant she accepted them, whatever they were. Arthur knocked on Rosa's door. He unceremoniously declared that one word from Rosa would have struck Yggdrasil. At the first order, I would beat the whole fool out of him. Rosa just laughed at these words, but Arthur was serious. He was Rosa's most loyal knight and would do whatever she ordered. Arthur remembered Rosa's words as a child for the rest of his life. He was not even a teenager then, and Rosa approached him at training, and with a smile asked him to become her knight. Arthur then refused without a second thought, and Rosa got angry. She shouted that she had heard that Arthur wanted to become a knight, so why not become White's knight? Arthur stuck his training sword into the ground and declared that no one in the world would like frozen ground where no plant could grow. Rose ran away in tears from these words, and Arthur was embarrassed and felt guilty. He understood that he had overstepped the mark, and instead of giving an honest answer, he had insulted Lady Rose. Some time later, Rose came to him again and showed some small plants that had sprouted in white. She spent a lot of time on it and was really proud of the result. Arthur was surprised. Rosa asked if Arthur liked white now. The boy understood that Rosa did all this because of his words, while Rosa meanwhile promised to melt the earth and grow trees and plants. Arthur admitted that the real reason was that his parents wanted him to be a great knight, so he would go elsewhere to become a swordsman. And Rosa said that her dream is to make everyone in white happy. Arthur noted that it was very difficult, but Rosa already knew that. She was going to work hard every day to achieve what she wanted, and so she asked once again if Arthur would become a knight of the kingdom she would build. Arthur said in the present that he still thinks this dream is unrealistic, but then he decided to risk everything for this dream. She might have changed a bit over time, but Arthur still took pride in what he did. The fact that Rosa could not fulfill all her dreams did not mean that she lost everything. Yggdrasil really did care for her. Arthur assured Rose of that as someone who was constantly watching from the sidelines. Rosa said she wanted Yggdrasil to be happy, to be rewarded for the time he spent and the sacrifices he made for Rosa and White. Rosa arrogantly believed that she was the only one who would make him happy. Rosa admitted that Yggdrasil had always worried about her. That was a fact. He said that he was happy, so Rosa ordered him to stay happy, but she still wasn't sure that she had done the right thing. James was bored in the tower until suddenly a teleporter opened from which Yggdrasil stepped. James was speechless, and Yggdrasil played a joke on him, pretending not to remember James. James, in tears of happiness, said that he already thought that Yggdrasil would never return and asked if he really, really came. Yggdrasil confirmed he had unfinished business. At the large table in the council hall, Yggdrasil explained to everyone what had happened to him and how his memory loss had caused him to be missing for 3 years and come to Lady Lang. However, Rosa stated that Yggdrasil didn't need to come back and explain everything. She said back then that he was free, but Yggdrasil said they still had a contract. Rosa said Sun told her the details of the contract. Yggdrasil confirmed that there would be no problem if this was done. Rosa immediately stood up and held out her hand for IG to break the contract as soon as possible. Sun choked on air, but Yggdrasil said that he needed some time to prepare everything. Rose asked him to hurry, and Yggdrasil left for the wizard's tower. San barely caught up with Yggdrasil, horrified. He was the only one who knew that after breaking the contract, Yggdrasil would disappear forever, but Yggdrasil was sure, and only thanked him for keeping the secret. After these events, White returned to his usual pace of life. As if nothing had happened, everyone was working and doing their own thing. In fact, they were all waiting for the end. James in the tower carefully asked Yggdrasil what they were going to do. Yggdrasil did not understand anything, and therefore asked all questions to be asked before he left the tower. James answered, and Yggdrasil raced down the corridor. Yggdrasil stormed into Rose's office, and from the doorway asked confused if Hadrian's offer was true. Rose pretended it was a small thing, but Yggdrasil didn't care. Rosa said she had just received another letter and wanted to discuss it. Sun clarified what it said this time, and Rosa read that Hadrian had asked to seriously consider the offer and come to the Empire. If Rosa truly cared about the future of her people, then she should forget old grudges and unite with the Empire to create a powerful nation and usher in a peaceful era. Rosa stated that Yggdrasil was unaware, but ever since Eiffel and Snow killed the crown prince, the people began to fear White and think they would attack soon, and the aristocrats had been spreading the rumor. And yes, even if the war starts, for now White was not inferior to the forces of the Empire, but Rosa was worried about how it would affect ordinary citizens. Yggdrasil clarified in a dead voice that Rosa was still going to meet Adrian, and then declared that this marriage was out of the question. He was not going to allow this meeting. Rosa stated that it was no longer Yggdrasil's concern as he would soon leave White. Yggdrasil feverishly said that they were still bound by contract and he was still Rosa's advisor. Rosa gave Yggdrasil a cold look and stated that in that case he should have hurried and prepared everything to terminate the contract as soon as possible. Rose ran out of the hall, Yggdrasil running after her, shouting her name. In the end, Rosa turned around and said to leave her alone. Yggdrasil was angry at the reason. He was not going to allow this marriage. Rosa shouted that she didn't have to listen to Yggdrasil, and he only assumed she was saying that to hurt him. Rosa was horrified in her mind, but pulled herself together and politely refused. Rosa said that she is the lady of this land, so she makes decisions for everything that is her responsibility. She might still be a child in Yggdrasil's eyes, but she wouldn't do something like that on a whim. Yggdrasil protested that in his eyes, Rose was no longer a child. He just wanted to be with someone who would make her happy. However, as Rosa wants, he will leave soon, so it does not concern him. Rose didn't understand why Yggdrasil had such a sad expression on his face. She said that he had found someone who made him happy, so he shouldn't have made that lady wait too long. Rose wanted Yggdrasil to be happy with all her heart, and therefore let him go, agreeing to break the contract. Yggdrasil asked sadly, "But what about the happiness of Rosa herself?" The lady smiled and replied that her happiness was here. Being Lady White is her greatest pride and joy. Yggdrasil helped Rose to love this land even more. He saved both White and herself. Rose was very grateful to Yggdrasil, but at the same time very sorry that they had taken so much from him. She would never forget everything he taught her, so now she just asked him to believe in her. Yggdrasil sighed and agreed. He just wanted to believe that Rosa would choose the path that would suit her the most, but he was sure that it would happen. Once in her room behind the closed door, Rosa tried to understand why she had actually said something that hurt Yggdrasil. Is this the kind of ruler she wanted to be? Rosa went out on the balcony and slapped her cheeks with her palms. Yggdrasil was right. She didn't have to think too much. Just be herself. That was the perfect option for her and for White. At the market, Golden Sun watched as Rosa gave Knocker directions. Sun thought she and Yggdrasil had gotten into a fight, but Rose seemed fine. She was even full of energy. Rosa approached them and asked how long they had been waiting. In return, Golden Sun gave everything she asked for, all population data, taxes, every temple and administrative building, and much more. Sun asked why Rosa decided to suddenly reorganize White's territory. Rosa smiled slyly and said that she was preparing an answer to the Emperor, one that would be like herself. In the tower, Yggdrasil suddenly asked James if he was aware of what Lady Rose was up to. At James's fair remark that Yggdrasil could ask himself, the Archmage growled. James said in a panic that he was just going to Rose and jumped out of the tower, and Yggdrasil sighed heavily. He shouldn't have taken his anger out on the innocent James. Yggdrasil thought about what Rose had told him. He should be proud that she had grown into such a skilled mistress, but all he felt was anxiety and embarrassment. Yggdrasil wasn't sure if his former self could take it with dignity. Rose's words about the maid she loved crept unbidden into his memory, and Yggdrasil blushed to the tips of his ears. James found Arthur, Gold, and Sand together. Rosa came in next. She was glad that James had come, because she was going to say something important, and his help was necessary. Rosa gathered everyone present here, because she wanted them all to go to the Empire with her. James panicked, but Rosa insisted they were leaving now and asked to open the teleporter. James excused himself that he absolutely needed Yggdrasil's permission to open the teleport, and Rosa gave him a conspiratorial wink. She asked James specifically so that Yggdrasil wouldn't find out. James kept saying that when Yggdrasil found out, he would kill him. Rose was furious and asked James to think at whose hand he would choose to die. Yggdrasil or Rose herself? Yggdrasil was nervous that James had been gone for so long. He asked Jin to look for James, and the golem replied that White didn't have the mage, neither did Rosa and the others. Yggdrasil panicked. Yggdrasil tried to calm down, told himself that Rosa would manage, make the right decision, he should trust her. But after a few minutes he couldn't stand it and ran after her. A gasping Imperial guard burst into Hadrian's office and shouted that everything was very urgent. The ministers were indignant. How did he dare to rush to the Emperor so brazenly? Rose proudly announced behind the guard that she had asked him to inform Adrian of her visit. Adrian's eyes sparkled when he saw Rosa. He greeted her happily. Hadrian showered Rose with compliments, and he himself thought that she had come with a dragoness, but without Yggdrasil. He expressed his hope that Rosa had properly considered his proposal if she had already come. Rosa assured Adrian that she had thought long and hard about the proposal, and had come to talk in person so that there would be no misunderstandings left between them. Just as Rosa opened her mouth again to voice her decision, a startled Yggdrasil jumped out of the teleporter. He yelled for Rosa to wait, Rosa was surprised and Adrian paled. Rosa was angry that Yggdrasil had come, and she ordered that the matter be left to her, and Yggdrasil declared that in any case, Rosa had no right to keep everything a secret from him. Rose ordered Arthur and James to keep Yggdrasil away until she had her say. James apologetically threw magical chains over Yggdrasil, while Arthur gripped his shoulder tightly. While Adrian thought about what was going on, Rosa asked him not to pay attention and placed the scroll with the answer in front of him. When Hadrian read it, he asked for an explanation of what it all meant. Rose, as Lady White, vowed to unite all the lands of White, free it from the Empire's rule, restore its old name, and make White an independent kingdom. Everyone was shocked. One of the ministers shouted that it was delusional. White in their eyes was only an arbitrary piece of the Empire, and such words were treason. That's why White collected the monsters. Rose remarked that she had created a paradise from the land that the Empire had abandoned. Also, considering that it was thanks to her that Hadrian became emperor, she had every right to ask him for this. Hadrian said that if they united, they would have the strongest state in the world, a peaceful rule called the Empire and White. He clarified whether he correctly understood that Rosa chose to separate. Rosa said it would be like White's conquest years ago. It did not bring peace to the Empire. If marriage meant peace for White, Rosa would have married long ago, but she and Adrian have different goals. Rosa accused the Empire that their people paid taxes out of fear, and decided to take advantage of the situation to get rich, reclaim lands, and build an army that everyone would fear. Adrian noted that if things were left as they were, the fear of White would explode. Rosa replied that people are afraid of the unknown, so she will open White's doors for everyone to see what they really are. Rosa was sure that this would solve all misunderstandings. She knew this because she had already seen how it worked in her kingdom, where different races and fates lived peacefully with each other. Adrian sighed and agreed if Rosa was willing to risk everything. The minister shouted that it was a mistake, but Adrian didn't listen. However, Rosa had to swear that she would not attack the Empire. Rosa said that she was satisfied with these conditions. She promised not to attack the Empire if it didn't annoy her, and Hadrian shivered at her confident tone. Hadrian signed the document, and Rose took out the seal that Knocker had specially made for the future kingdom of White. She sealed the document and joyfully grasped it in her hands. Rosa asked if Adrian despised her, and he only asked how she could remain so calm around a man who threatened her. Rosa pointed out that they took away Hadrian's power, so it's small stuff. Rosa said that she was worried about the condition of her people. Their lives meant much more to her than her own. Hadrian thought respectfully that this was the true queen's thoughts. Rose asked with a smile when people were able to move freely through the Empire and White, what country did Hadrian think they would choose? Adrian laughed that Rosa was very optimistic. However, Rose was just like the former king from Hadrian's first life. Who would have thought that so much time later he would meet a queen who inherited the same will? Perhaps the god gave Hadrian a second life so that he could see for himself how little he had achieved. As his descendants destroy the empire and the kingdom of White rises from the ashes. James, Sun, and Gold all admired Rose and what she had done. Rosa was embarrassed and said that without them nothing would have happened, and Yggdrasil was ashamed. Rose herself approached Yggdrasil and apologized for not saying anything. She knew that he hated the emperor, and so she decided to do everything without him. Yggdrasil replied that Rosa had nothing to apologize for. He did, because he almost ruined everything with his appearance. Rose as the new queen was simply incredible, and he was proud of her. Yggdrasil knelt down and said he had nothing more to teach Rose. He asked to accept his gratitude for fulfilling the last dream of the previous king and his own. The old king told Yggdrasil that he should have died when his people forsook him. Thanks to the help of the Archmage, it happened much later, and the king was happy. Thanks to Yggdrasil, the king came closer to his dream. Saying goodbye is always sad, but the king was only worried about leaving Yggdrasil alone. He had many more deaths ahead of him. Yggdrasil begged the king not to speak like that. He stayed close to the king because he wanted to, not because of orders or duty. The king asked not to cry when he was gone. The king told Yggdrasil not to do anything stupid and try to die for him. He believed that there was a reason why God created them both and made them meet each other. At last the king said that he had no doubt that one day a warm and comfortable rest awaited Yggdrasil, and he asked Yggdrasil not to doubt it either. Rose woke up Yggdrasil, who had dozed off on his desk. She was surprised because he never slept during the day, but she had actually come to offer to celebrate White's independence. Rose took out a full bottle of dark moon wine, Yggdrasil's favorite drink, and it pleased him that she bothered about the little things. Yggdrasil went to get the glasses. Over a glass of wine, Rosa asked if Yggdrasil would come to her coronation. He agreed without thinking, because he wanted to see with his own eyes how Rosa would officially become the queen. Rose was amused by this answer. She was afraid that Yggdrasil would want to hurry up and leave. She had always wondered why he stayed with the White, since the king Yggdrasil had sworn to was dead. Yggdrasil realized that Genie had told Rosa about his childhood. In fact, when he ate the dragon heart, he no longer belonged to either the human world or the dragon world. White became a place that connected him to reality, and even though it was cold and deserted here, he still had memories of people who were very dear to him. That's why when the king died, Yggdrasil wanted to protect his descendants, even though he barely remembered the king because the golem with the memories was broken. Yggdrasil said it was nothing. It had to happen to protect his memory. In addition, this way he will be able to create new memories with new people. These words moved Rosa. Rosa was very glad she was White, or she would never have met Yggdrasil. She expressed her gratitude as part of the royal White family and said she was very happy to be around. Yggdrasil had once said that he would run away with Rose when the going got tough, but those words only made her move forward. Just knowing he was there gave me the courage to face anything. Rose thought that as long as he was around, everything would be fine. She took Yggdrasil's presence for granted, and now she was apologizing for it. However, she was not the only one who thought so. Yggdrasil replied that everything he did for himself, because otherwise he would have been consumed by loneliness. He would have wasted a lot of time without a purpose. When Rose's divine power first awakened, Yggdrasil smiled. He then thought that his boring life had finally come to an end and the time of peace had finally arrived. Yggdrasil thought that if the god had a plan for him, it had to be him. The best end of life would have been death from the fact that he protected Rosa. But everything that Rose dreamed about became Yggdrasil's dream. He felt the precious time when his life was coming to an end. He even dreamed of a future he had no right to dream of. Yggdrasil unexpectedly cried, shocking Rosa. He gave her a big hug and said that after all, he was really happy to serve her and be there for her. Rosa asked if Yggdrasil was okay, and he quickly pushed her away, stood up, and started babbling that if she needed help with her coronation preparations, he was in the tower. Yggdrasil left, thanking him for the wine, and Rose felt her heart skip a beat and blush. Sun called Rosa several times, but she thought hard. She said that Yggdrasil had been acting strange lately, as if he had been different since he returned. Rosa complained that Yggdrasil was sometimes honest, sometimes he was clearly hiding something. She thought he was happy because he had found his love, but Yggdrasil looked sad, as if he would never see Rose again. San assumed that Yggdrasil was behaving this way because he would soon leave the place he called home. Rosa thought, and then asked why Sun had come. He pretended to forget and clutched a box in his hand. Sun found Yggdrasil on the dock and angrily asked Yggdrasil why he was making Rosa worry. He would rather tell the truth instead of confusing with his behavior. Yggdrasil bitterly questioned if he should tell that he was going to die for Rose but wanted to live and be with her, and that most likely he loves her. San grimaced. It was definitely worth being honest with someone like that. Yggdrasil countered that it was Sanu who should be honest. What if Rosa decides not to break the contract if he tells everything? San should be happy when Yggdrasil is gone. San couldn't stand it and grabbed Yggdrasil by the collar. He did this precisely because he was honest with himself. He loved Rose and wanted her to be happy, even if that happiness meant being with Yggdrasil. San relented and said it was because Rose loved Yggdrasil. If he disappears without saying a word, Rosa will blame herself and live with the pain of loss until her death. Yggdrasil said that if Rose found out, he would never break the contract. She doesn't know what her life will be like as long as she remains bound to Yggdrasil. San countered that even if Rosa's life was to be full of suffering and sorrow, that was her choice, not Yggdrasil deciding for her, so he should tell everything. Yggdrasil unhooked San from his arms and simply asked him to leave. The enraged elf strode away, gritting his teeth. If Yggdrasil wasn't going to tell anything, he would. Sun brought Rosa a present. It is a set of jewels charmed to bestow health and happiness, a family heirloom, and San would be delighted if Rosa wore them to her coronation. Rosa wasn't sure she could accept such a precious thing, but Sun insisted. He would like to give Rosa something else, but he knew that she would probably not accept it. Rose blushed and took away the jewelry. San was just about to tell Rosa something about Yggdrasil when there was a knock at the door. Rosa apologized and asked to wait, unless it was urgent. But the guest wanted to talk right now? Lady Lang entered the room with a beaming smile, and Rose gasped, had she come for Yggdrasil? Langa was going to sit quietly as Yggdrasil wanted, but her sleeping friend would be upset if she didn't do anything. Lady Lang began by saying that her real name was Anastasia. Rosa knew that name. While Anastasia said that she was here to correct a misunderstanding, the door opened and Snow flew in, shouting, "Mom!" The dragons were incredibly happy to see each other again. Anastasia explained to Rosie that she was a white dragon, and there was nothing between her and Yggdrasil. She was only helping him solve his memory problem at the request of his old friend Grace. Rose did not understand why Yggdrasil lied to her. Anastasia replied that it was because Yggdrasil had a contract with her. He was lying for Rosa's sake and nothing else. Rosa didn't understand, and Sun then asked if she remembered the contract. He explained that if Rose broke the magical contract, then the magical power of Yggdrasil, which was the price of the contract, would also disappear. Rosa understood that she would lose her divine power, but that was not the main problem. The only reason for Yggdrasil's long life was his magic that supported the dragon's heart. While Yggdrasil was in the corridor mulling over San's words and trying to convince himself that he really should have been honest for once, a devastated and irritated Rose came out to him alone. Rosa asked why he lied. Had Yggdrasil decided to die and leave her here alone? Yggdrasil did not understand, but Rosa interrupted that Anastasia had told her everything. Rosa desperately asked what she had done wrong. Did Yggdrasil hate her so much that he wanted to die? Yggdrasil objected. It wasn't right, and then Rose screamed, "Why?" Yggdrasil said that Rose no longer needed him. He was about to break the contract and leave, but the more time he spent with Rosa, the harder it was to reject her love. Before Yggdrasil knew it, his feelings had grown to unheard-of proportions. He might not be able to leave when the time came. He was scared, and therefore lied to Rosie. All of Yggdrasil's memories were of Rose, about the radiant, never-losing self-control, even in the most difficult situations, Rosa. He fell in love with her because it was impossible otherwise. Yggdrasil assured that soon Rose would forget about him, find a person she would love, and be happy. Rosa only asked how he knew what her happiness was. Yggdrasil, who signed the contract without saying a word, wished Rosa a happy life, asked for nothing. If he is Rosa's happiness, can she live with him? Yggdrasil grabbed Rose and shouted that she was mortal, leaving him devastated. He did not want Rosa to live an eternal life full of suffering, to fall asleep forever with memories of her, his wish. Rose asked if eternal suffering and desolation was all Yggdrasil wanted. Now she knew that everyone he loved had left him, so the loneliness was unbearable for him. Rosa sighed and said that she wanted to sneeze at this normal life. Her life was never normal at all. Her happiness was right in front of her. She just had to reach out. Rosa offered to live together as long as they want, and then, if they get bored, then just fall asleep one day and not regret anything. For the first and only time, Yggdrasil turned to the god. He prayed only for one thing, never to part with Rosa in his life. Rose offered to be together forever, and Yggdrasil wept with relief. Lucifer, king of the demon world, lord of fear, has always ruled the darkness. While he was thinking about his great self, a powerful explosion rang out in his office. Shasta came to Lucifer. Because of his actions, the great wizard lost his memory, and the future queen was devastated. Shasta came to ask for compensation for all the trouble he had caused White. Shasta brought the contract that summoned Lucifer to Earth. If he refused, then Snow, Gold, and Eiffel would throw holy water on hell. They have already menacingly surrounded the tower. It's time to go to the coronation. Rosa looked incredibly attractive and very mature in her inaugural outfit. Yggdrasil inquired whether his beloved was ready for the ceremony. Rose believed that she was simply changing the status of a lady to that of a queen. Wasn't that too pompous a procession? Yggdrasil just smiled because this ceremony was very important. Rose couldn't calm down, so she asked Yggdrasil to lean down and kiss him gently on the lips. This instantly dispelled all doubts and fears. Rosa went to the ceremony first and asked Yggdrasil not to linger, and he at that time awkwardly thought that he had definitely not taught her such behavior. The ceremony was very solemn and grand. Rosa swore an oath to her people and bowed her knees before the Pope and the Archbishop. All friends and relatives were nearby. Yggdrasil lifted the enchanted tiara and placed it on the head of White's new queen, while everyone present shouted long life to Queen Rose and applauded. Adrian also came to greet Rosa. He asked San and Yggdrasil not to glare, but Yggdrasil grabbed Rose and declared that she was already busy. Yggdrasil could not believe that Rose insisted on being crowned on her birthday. Rosa just wanted to save a little and did not see a problem in such a decision. Rosa suddenly asked how Lucifer was doing, and he was trying to do all of White's administrative work. He could not return to the kingdom of demons because he was sprinkled with holy water. Rose suddenly suggested that Yggdrasil celebrate their birthdays on the same day if he didn't remember his. One birthday and one death, always together. Yggdrasil gladly agreed because Rose gave him a new life. From now on, nothing could prevent their joint happiness.